Showtime!
What's going on?
4, 3, 2, 1.
Alright, cause I just moved some settings around. Can anyone hear us? I don't think. Hi, just 1 second. Okay, so we have a beautiful issue going on right now. There's no audio at all.
Really?
Let's see, can you guys hear us now? Okay, I just changed the setting. There's sound now. Okay, good. Good. Okay, I figured out what it was. All right, so welcome to that delay. So I'm going to take this off a little bit because there's no one around, and we're already getting follows. Welcome. Actually, let me check quickly, see what that last person who followed us, and then we'll get the show on the road. I'm going to go into our Twitch mode here. And hang on. Yeah, because we're doing a new live streaming method here. We're going through browser, through a different application. Last time we were on GoToMeeting. This time we're at something else. Okay. Yeah. Azariah and Not Famous followed us, so thank you for following us right now. Welcome everyone to the DEFCON 201 July meeting, which we call I've Been So Crazy, and Saracel just finally followed us. He's right across from me here. Now, unfortunately, we were supposed to have an external camera here that I might be able to put up later, but actually, real cool thing I want to try really quick, right? Let's actually add that right now. Let's see, video capture device. Let's see. I have to add it back in. Okay. Let's give us one moment. There we go. That's the other end of it. All right, let's I can actually now do this. It just won't be directly through the browser. So custom. Here's our usual resolution size. Move this down past alerts. There we go. We hacked the plant. So yeah, now I can kind of move this camera remotely. We're actually here live on location. We're here at, let me unplug these guys. Let's see how far I can go out. This is our normal venue here at Subculture. It's kind of a retro 80s, 90s looking thing. They have, those are Raspberry Pi machines that are currently not being used in the back thanks to COVID, and they have Funko Pops and cool wallpaper and everything. It's really great. And we actually do have a couple of people over here. Do you guys mind if we flash the camera over to you guys, or are you confidential? Okay, just want to show we already have a couple of guys here. There should be more coming within the hour here, so thanks to all. The gross part about COVID is that thanks to us having to wear masks, we all look like Blacava thieves just naturally. So this is like our true face here. So what we are going to do is we're actually going to blow some time, and we're going to run up until about like 6:15 because I'm putting the mask on because there's people coming by. A video that was just debuted yesterday from Black Hat. It's a really cool video about IoT devices and all the different ways they get compromised. We're going to try to make it work on here, and we hope you enjoy all of this. So hang tight, and you'll see this awesome talk by some of the people at Black Hat USA. Reminder that Black Hat is one of the many online things that's happening next month, including DEFCON Safe Mode and Hope and Diane Initiative. It's basically Hacker Summer Camp is now a Hacker Month. Oh, and I almost forgot. If you always wonder, here's the man, the myth, there's Saracel. And then afterwards, we're going to hang around, we're going to talk and chat and hang out for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to start going into the talks because we have some really cool people here to talk about stuff. So stand back and enjoy. We're going to run the Black Hat thing now. So let's see, going over here. It's Uncle's Side Pocket, trying to futz through technology that he doesn't know works. So let's see here. That's off. I'm just going to leave everything alone except for the mic, so here we go.
We definitely wanted to go this year,
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to the latest installment in the Black Hat webcast series. 4 IoT systems, 4 threat modeling failures. Brought to you by Black Hat, Cipher Security, and Trust Data Card Company, and Informa. My name is Steve Paul. I'm with Black Hat. I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters, and later in the program we'll ask for your feedback. We strongly encourage participation and are happy to take your questions and comments. You can participate in our Q&A session by asking questions at any time. Just type them into the Q&A text box in the bottom left of our console. We'll answer as many questions as time permits after our presentations. Slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and PDF copies of our presentations can be found in the resource box in the bottom of our console as well.
This goes on
At this
for
time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. And if you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the help question mark icon on the bottom of our console.
Load this up and go
If
do other
slides are
shit.
not advancing, please press the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your browser. And now on to our presentation, 4 IoT systems, 4 threat modeling failures. Discussing today's topic will be Andrew Tierney, hardware team leader with Pen Test Partners. We also have our sponsor presenter, John Grimm, Vice President Strategy with N-Cipher Security, an N-Trust data card company. First, we'll hear from Andrew.
Great, thank you, Steve. So today I'm going to be talking about 4 different IoT devices and 4 threat modeling failures. So what should you take away from this? Well, I don't want you to take away jargon or technical detail. I'm not going to go into huge technical depth on these vulnerabilities.
Hold on, guys. We're having a bit of a technical difficulty thing here. Just give us a moment.
A lot of the failures we see in threat modeling is that people just didn't conceive of the
Hang on. Sorry about this.
The first thing I'm going to talk about is a crypto wallet. Now this is specifically referring.
Give us one moment.
To Bitcoin. This was something that happened a couple of years ago now. They won the pony at DEFCON 2 years in a row for lamest blender response. So first off, what is a cryptocurrency? Well, a cryptocurrency allows you to spend funds that are stored on a distributed ledger or blockchain. Now to do that, you've got to sign your own transactions with a private key. Someone can verify those transactions with a public key. So you have a private key, people can validate that with a public key. Now the thing is, you've got to keep that private key very, very secret. If anybody gains access to that private key, they've got access to your funds. So originally people stored these on their laptops, but the problem there is if someone steals your laptop, they've got your keys. Malware gets into your computer, they've got your keys. So something called a hardware wallet was invented. Now what a hardware wallet is a dedicated piece of hardware that stores the key separately to your computer. The hardware wallet can sign transactions. So you from your laptop send the transaction through to it, it will sign it, the hardware wallet, with your private key, and then it will return the signed transaction to you. So the key never leaves the hardware wallet. That's the whole concept there. Now there's still a problem with this. What happens if someone steals the hardware wallet? They can just use it like an oracle. They can pass a transaction to it, it will sign that transaction, they've got a signed transaction, they can spend your funds. So hardware wallets evolved. The first thing that was done was that people added a keypad or an entry means to the device. So you could enter a password or a passphrase before it would allow you to use the private key. That meant that if someone stole the device, they couldn't use your private key to sign transactions. Now the other problem was what happens if someone changed the transaction that was displayed on your laptop before it was sent to the hardware wallet? Instead of saying send 100 Bitcoin to Andrew Tierney, you say send 100 Bitcoin to John McAfee. Now the way they solved that was by adding a display. You confirm the transaction is correct on the display. So this is what a hardware wallet does. But a hardware wallet is designed to withstand physical access attacks. So it's specifically designed to do this. Now different wallets do it to different extents. Now physical access to a device, you'd probably be able to get the keys eventually. There's been lots and lots of failures in these controls. So we look at it like a box that you can't see into, a box where you can't get that private key. The problem is attackers have worked out how to take that box away and gain access to that key. Now it only has to withstand attack for a certain length of time. If you know your hardware wallet's gone, you can transfer funds if you've got a backup of the key, and then the attacker doesn't have any value for that key. But some people still weren't happy with this. So what they invented was something called a brain wallet. Now a brain wallet's different. A brain wallet doesn't store your key. It doesn't store it permanently. So instead of it storing your key and you entering a passphrase to let the key be used, what you do is you provide a passphrase to it. It then uses that passphrase deterministically to generate the key. Use some form of derivation to take the passphrase you enter into it and generate the key. It then uses that key to sign the transactions. So the idea is, with an ideal brain wallet, is that the key doesn't persist on the device. That means if someone steals your brain wallet, they don't have access to your key. The attack has been frustrated. So no matter how insecure the device is, as long as they can't steal the key, it might not be a problem. Now, what BitFi said was that your private keys are never stored anywhere except your own brain. Now, most of us here work with computers. We know that if we're entering a passphrase into a device, it's deriving a key and then signing something. That key does exist somewhere that isn't my brain. It's in the device. It's in the RAM of the device. It's in the processor. So this is false, but this was how BitFi kept on launching into it. This was their threat model. The key didn't exist on the device. It only existed in your brain. So they didn't really think about protecting the key. So when we break a brain wallet down in a bit more detail, we've got a processor, we've got flash storing the firmware, and we've got RAM. They're all powered. There's a USB connection coming into the processor. It's used for charging and updating firmware. But those keys are stored in RAM. Now, they might only be stored in RAM for a fraction of a second, but they are stored in RAM. Now, we demonstrated that we could actually read those keys from RAM on that device. And when we did that, BitFi responded. And the way they responded was they said, we think that if he was able to retrieve the private key from the device, it would have to be a rooted device. Now, they were correct. It did have to be a rooted device. It was rooted in the process of this cold boot attack. So this bit was good. Valid assumption. If you root a device, you have to restart it. And when you restart it, it wipes the RAM clean. That's that last bit that's important. When you restart it, it wipes the RAM clean. This was an assumption they'd made. So in their threat model, they assumed that taking the power away from the device would wipe the RAM clean. Now, in an ideal world, yeah, that probably is the case. If I take the power away from RAM used in most devices, DDR-RAM, and wait some period of time, the key will go from that RAM. It will be gone. We can't recover it if it's not there anymore. Now, Ryan Castellucci, who was one of the people who worked on BitFi, he was instrumental actually in several aspects of it, said, much of hacking is about understanding systems better than those who built them and using that knowledge to do what is supposed to be impossible. I think this is such a brilliant saying. And when they said this, it's just stuck with me for so long. I use this all of the time now. So what does that really mean? Well, the assumption was that the keys were wiped from RAM and the power was taken away. But in reality, if our attacker comes along, he disconnects the power, he reconnects the power very quickly, so restarts the device, the key persists in memory. It doesn't get wiped. So if we just take the power away for a fraction of a second, the key is still there. He can then root the device, and when he's rooted the device, he has access to the key. So this is what was done. This was carried out by a guy called Salim, who has done a lot of attacks on hardware wallets. And it's called a cold boot attack. The idea is you reset the device and you read the contents of RAM. Quite often this attack, people actually remove the RAM from the PC or the laptop quickly after cooling it and then read it in another device. This didn't have to happen here because we could just reset it, root it, and then gain access to the RAM. Now, importantly, in terms of a window of opportunity here, it has to happen after someone has entered the passphrase into the device. You can't carry out this attack before because the key wouldn't exist in RAM. So that window of opportunity is limited. If they reset that device, if it runs out of battery, the keys will be wiped. So this attack maybe isn't particularly real world. It's also very easy to mitigate against. You can sanitize the memory. What do I mean by that? You wipe the key in code. So you just say, I don't want that key anymore, get rid of it from memory. It will exist for a finite length of time, but if someone steals it from you, it won't be there anymore. It's actually quite challenging to do this on a modern device when you've got multiple layers of indirection before you actually gain access to the RAM. So this cold boot attack maybe isn't particularly real world. So what is a more real world attack? Well, BitFi didn't seem to think that this was a problem really. They put the cold boot attack as the serious one, but this one I'm about to describe, they thought was lesser. The bounty that they offered for this was a lot lower. So what we can do is, because we can root the device, we can modify the firmware. So the attacker comes along. The attacker modifies the firmware of the device. What are they doing by modifying that firmware? Well, they're changing it so that the firmware will take the user's key and send it to the attacker. Instead of it just storing the key temporarily in RAM, it takes that key and sends it to us. So we've got hold of that key. We've made a malicious firmware for the device. The normal user will come along, they'll enter their passphrase, the key exists in RAM, the attacker will then have access to that key. Now this is called an evil maid attack. So we modify the firmware to steal the keys. It needs to happen before the device is used. It needs to happen before someone's entered the passphrase. Now this, in my mind, is a much larger window of opportunity, making the risk of this attack much more serious. So why is it called an evil maid attack? Well, it's called evil maid because a maid can come into your hotel room and your laptop, your phone, your hardware wallet that you've left in the hotel room can be tampered with. You come back, you use them, and you're compromised. That's why it's an evil maid attack. So you leave your Bitfi in a hotel room, it can be compromised. You're going through airport security. You quite often lose sight of your personal belongings for a minute, 30 seconds. If you can root the device quickly enough and you've got enough funds on it, an attacker might use that to gain access, backdoor the device, and they've got access to your keys. Maybe more importantly, however, supply chain attacks. Someone in the supply chain, any time before you receive the device, could modify the firmware, perform an evil maid attack so they can steal your keys. So the window of opportunity is huge. And that's why I personally think the attack that's high risk here is the evil maid attack. Now, Bitfi made a mistake in their threat model here. First off, they assumed that the keys were wiped. They assumed that it was only stored in your brain, the passphrase. But also, they really didn't consider physical access to that device because they didn't think that anything useful was stored on it. The next attack I'm going to talk about is telematics to domain admin. So what is telematics? Modern vehicles are really complex. You've generally got a powertrain CAN bus connecting the engine to the pedals and to the steering wheel. You've got comfort CAN buses connecting things like heated seats and moving seats together. Now, cars are becoming connected. And to connect cars, they need connectivity. So what people added, or what manufacturers added, was a thing called a TCU, a telematic control unit. It's essentially a cellular modem with CAN connectivity. That then connects out using a cellular network to the internet or a cloud platform. And you can get diagnostic information sent out. You can get map updates. You can have firmware updates for your vehicle delivered over that. You can stop the car if it's stolen. It's a very useful thing, but it's also incredibly high risk, but not always for the obvious reasons. So what does a telematics control unit look like? It looks like this. It's actually fairly simple. It's a cellular modem, CAN bus, a few antenna connectors, and a processor. Quite often these things run something like Linux. It's quite a complex system, but we can compromise these quite a lot of the time with physical access to the device. So how does a cellular device actually gain access to a network, an IP network? Normally, when you're using your phone, you have something called a public APN, an access point name. The telematics unit will connect through to a cell tower, and then it will go to something called an APN that translates that kind of cellular world through into an IP world. Our phones use public APNs generally because we want to access the internet openly. Lots of consumer IT uses public APNs, but telematics units quite often use something called a private APN. Now, a private APN differs. We connect to a different APN, provide different credentials to it, and that APN will generally then establish a VPN connection out through to a private network. It's a tunnel from the telematics unit through to a private network based on the SIM card and some credentials. Now, of course, we've got physical access to the telematics unit. We can take the SIM card out of it. It might not be a socketed SIM like this shown on the screen. It might be an embedded SIM. If it's an embedded SIM, we can still take it out and just solder to it. But that allows us to then connect to that APN and behave like we're the telematics unit. So why does this have impact? Well, we look at a TCU, and normally what happens, it establishes its GSM connection. We go out to the APN, there's then a VPN connection through to some kind of endpoint that allows us access to a network. Through that network, we'll then be able to connect using a telematics client through to a telematics server and send maybe HTTP requests or MQTT or something like that. So that's how it's meant to work. The problem we found is that an attacker comes along. They can take the SIM out, they can maybe route the telematics unit. They've got access to this GSM and APN tunnel that goes through to a network. What happens if they start exploring that network? Well, what we found is quite often it allows fairly unrestricted access to either a DMZ or a corporate network. So once you've got unrestricted access to a DMZ or corporate network, a lot of the time it's only a matter of time before we gain very, very extreme control of that, the domain controller, complete control. So in this instance, the telematics unit itself was very secure. The firmware was signed, JTAG was locked, there were no open serial ports, it had a unique identity. But the problem was the network that was exposed by the APN it connected to was the big risk. So we couldn't compromise the telematics units, but we could compromise the corporate network using something gained from them. The thing was, there's hundreds of these telematics units out there. They're in vehicles. We can buy a car, take the telematics unit out, reverse engineer it at our leisure. The next one I'm going to look at is a boring charger. You'll find out why I've misspelt this in a short while. This is an EV car charger. So EV cars, electric cars, are becoming more and more common. And charging those, people want that to be smart. They want to see how much power they've used. They want to take advantage of cheap energy at night. People want to bill for charging cars. So these chargers are smart. They've quite often got connectivity. We bought one of these, and that's what it looked like inside. On the right-hand side, I think a few of you might recognize that. It's the underside of a Raspberry Pi. Now, the Raspberry Pi has taken the world by storm. I think last count, I've got about 25 of them in my house. I'm not using many of them, but there's thousands of them everywhere. But they're maybe not the most appropriate device for a commercial product. Why is that? Well, in the first instance, how do we get hold of the firmware for a Raspberry Pi? It's stored on a micro SD card. So we take the micro SD card out, we put it in a laptop, we've got access to the firmware. We can root the device, because now we can modify the password of root, put it back in, and we've gained root access. It doesn't have any physical protection from reverse engineering. Now, once we had gained access to that firmware, what we found was that the bulk of functionality was implemented in a very small number of Python scripts. Now, reverse engineering Python is obviously easy. You need a text editor, that's it. And we quite quickly found some problems. And the first one you can see here, the device would establish a connection out to an FTP server for certain communications. The username and password was hard-coded across all of those devices. It was the same for every device. What that meant was if I took the firmware from one device, I had the credentials to connect to the FTP server and pretend to be any device. The next thing was it would establish communication out to a server for more real-time communications. Now, it's always important you authenticate the other person you're speaking with. If I want to transfer money from my bank, I need to make sure I'm actually speaking to my bank, not to anyone else. That's what TLS provides for, and certificate authority. We validate the identity of the other person. Now, the way that this device did that was the device said, hello, server from Linuxbox, and then if the server said, hello, Linuxbox from server, they believed they were talking to each other. No cryptography, nothing fancy, 2 strings. This is not strong authentication. And we could see this from the firmware. The next thing was the encryption. Now, they were using AES. Now, when people say AES, that quite often leads to that phrase, military-grade encryption. The problem is it doesn't matter how strong the encryption is if the key is the same for every single device. This was the case here. Every device used the same AES key for all communications. There was no notion of a session key or anything like that. What that meant was, again, with access to the firmware, we now had the ability to decrypt communications between the devices and the server. So this is looking really bad. It's a lot worse than just a normal connection using HTTPS, a TLS certificate connecting through to a server. Home-rolled encryption with a shared key. The next thing was, it performed firmware updates. Now, firmware updates, remote firmware updates, are a vital part of the IoT. Without them, you can't fix vulnerabilities. You can't keep your devices up to date. So these updates that the device performed were sent using this strange encryption method before, but the files themselves were encrypted. Now, the files themselves, again, were encrypted with exactly the same key that the communications was encrypted with, and the same key for every device. So with access to one device, we could recover that key, decrypt the firmware. That is a bit of a problem, but the bigger issue is, generally with the firmware, you're not actually bothered about confidentiality. There shouldn't really be anything hidden in a firmware. What you're looking for is authenticity. You want to make sure that the firmware being pushed to the devices actually came from the manufacturer, that a malicious actor hasn't modified that firmware and pushing it out to all of those devices. So in summary, on this device, we had weak physical protection. It's a Raspberry Pi that we can pull an SD card out from. Hard-coded server credentials across all devices. Weak server authentication that meant we could act as a person in the middle. A hard-coded encryption key so that we could decrypt those communications. And finally, the firmware was encrypted, but we could make our own encrypted firmware that we could load onto devices. Not great. Now, you might have seen this saying, physical access means game over. And the idea of this is if you gain prolonged physical access to a device, you can get access to the data on it. And to a certain extent, that is true. You can make it significantly more difficult, but there's a problem with the IoT. The thing is that the device is already in the hands of an attacker. You're selling that device. The chargers are going to be installed in people's homes. They're being sold on Amazon. I mean, we bought this next day delivery on Amazon and it turned up. But people can buy them. They can reverse engineer them and look at them at their leisure. So physical protections either need to be very, very secure, or you need to accept that someone's going to compromise the device. Now, if someone compromises the device, that might be okay, as long as that doesn't lead to lots of bad things happening. Now, we're using this term now, break once, run everywhere. If I can take details that I've recovered from one device or a vulnerability I find on one device and use that to impact many devices, we've got a problem. So this is what we saw here. FTP credentials that were the same across all devices, an encryption key that was the same across all devices, finding out the authentication to the server was weak, break once, run everywhere, or a Bohr attack. So what does that allow us to do? Well, the idea is we compromise that single device. With that single device, sometimes we may gain credentials to a platform, we compromise the platform, we compromise all of the devices. Now, we did not do that with this charger. This testing was researched, so we couldn't actually connect to the platform and do anything of any significance to it. But on paid testing, where we're allowed to mess about with the servers as we want, we quite often do gain access to the platform and compromise all devices. So weak physical protection plus break once, run everywhere attacks equals risk to the entire platform. So if they'd realized that the Pi didn't provide any physical protection, then they could have put unique keys on every device. They could have used TLS so that it doesn't matter if I compromise one device, I still can't intercept communications for all of them. It was the combination of the two issues that made it significantly worse. Now, the last one I'm going to move on to is body cameras. It's quite topical, really. You've probably seen police officers wearing body cameras. Nearly all large forces use them, and they're very, very common in the UK and the US. There's lots and lots of different brands, and I'm not speaking about one particular brand here. So what does a body camera do? Well, it records footage. Why does it do that? Well, there's two primary reasons. One is evidence against criminals, and the other one is to keep our police forces in check. These are both absolutely crucial purposes. Now, that footage it stores is quite low quality generally. It's not HD or anything like that, but it still consumes a lot of space. And again, we come back to our little friend here, the SD card. So most cameras use SD cards, and it's the same with body cameras. They'll have an SD card in them. It might have a blob of glue on it, stopping you taking it out. But what happens if that body camera is lost or stolen? Can someone gain access to that footage? Now, confidentiality is important for a body camera. Police officers aren't always dealing with things in public. They attend domestic abuse calls, vulnerable people and things like that. That footage shouldn't end up on the wider internet. It shouldn't end up being leaked to other people. So confidentiality is important. Confidentiality is simply protecting the content of message being determined by someone else. It's a simple concept. The way we normally do that is using encryption. We quite often use symmetric encryption keys like AES, where we encrypt and decrypt the same key. What that means is someone without access to that key is unable to determine the contents of the message. And this is used in body cameras. So we have the SD card, the video comes into the device, there's a key stored in the operating system, the video is encrypted using that key and then stored encrypted on the SD card. The key is not on the SD card. What that means is if the body camera is lost or stolen, an attacker comes along who takes the SD card out, they can't access the footage because they don't have the key. Now, this only works against a naive attacker. If that attacker were to realize the key was stored on the camera, they can attack the camera, gain access to the key, and decrypt the footage. But it is a barrier to people recovering that footage. I think the security world quite often shies away from controls that aren't quite perfect. This is certainly a barrier. But what happens if someone tries to tamper with that footage? So we've discussed confidentiality, but the footage from these things is used as evidence. Now, if someone can tamper with that evidence, either by altering it, changing the time or date, changing the audio on that footage, it can massively change the meaning there. So we need to ensure it's authentic. Now, authenticity is just ensuring that an entity or message are genuine. The way we normally do that is using signing. We do it when we sign checks, but we also do it on computers, digital signatures. We sign a piece of data using a private key, and then that signature can be validated with a public key. It's a very common concept that we use every day when we communicate with websites. So how do body cameras do this? Now, again, I'm not referring to any particular brand here. This is just the image off Wikipedia. When you get off your shift, you take your body camera off your shirt and you put it in something called a dock. That dock will then offload the footage from the camera and upload it to a server or cloud. It's at that point that the data is signed. So what we've got is a body camera taking footage, encrypting it using a key stored on the camera, then sending it through to the dock. The dock signs that data and then uploads it to the cloud. What this protects against is someone coming along with their own footage and trying to upload it to the cloud. The issue there is we've got signed data that's passed through the dock. We can validate that signature, and then we've got someone else's footage that has not been signed. So it doesn't validate. So this provides a degree of authenticity. But we've also got this problem that the cameras are at risk of physical access. So they do get dropped, they do get stolen. Now, the attacker can come along, and if they're not as naive as the attacker I described earlier, who just pulls the SD card out, they realise that that key is in fact stored in the operating system. They can root the device, they can recover the memory from it, they can get the key, and then they can decrypt the footage. So they've gained access to it. Now, the way that some people have solved this is using something called a secure element. Now, a secure element is a specific piece of hardware that locks a key up inside it, and like a hardware wallet, almost allows data to be encrypted and signed using that key, but doesn't let the key out. So now we can't gain access to that key. Now, you'd think the problem is solved, but the issue with a body camera is that active encrypting the video footage always has to be available. If the police officer hits the record button, it needs to start recording immediately. So that secure element acts as an oracle again. We can provide it with footage, it will encrypt that footage using a key stored in it, and it will be stored as encrypted footage. There's no way of gatekeeping access to that key. As an attacker, we can exploit that. Instead of us encrypting the footage using the device as an oracle, what we do is we flip it round and we use that oracle to decrypt the footage. The attacker's never seen the key. All he cares about is decrypting the footage. This can also be used to inject incorrect footage into the system. If you gain root access to a body camera, instead of the genuine footage being there, you can replace it with fake footage. It will be encrypted by the secure element. It will then be uploaded to the cloud. Because the signature is implied at the dock, it's trusted. So we've got a problem there. So we could gatekeep that secure element, like a hardware wallet. We could have that PIN pad on it. You type your PIN in, it then lets you encrypt or decrypt footage. The problem is that you need this availability. It needs to work immediately. And then when it is working, the keys are unlocked anyway. So if someone steals a body camera that's already encrypting footage, they've got access to that oracle again. It's a really challenging problem to solve, really. You could use public and private keys, but then key distribution becomes challenging. The other thing is, what happens if there is a malicious insider? That evidence signing. Obviously, a police officer has prolonged access to the camera. They can replace that footage. It's encrypted. It's signed by the doc. Some people will have access to the doc for prolonged periods as well. Can they extract the keys from that and sign their own data? You've got to consider a malicious insider who has prolonged access to that hardware in the threat model for a body camera. So what is more important with these, confidentiality or authenticity? Well, confidentiality is important. We need to stop a vulnerable person's footage of them being shown on the internet. Authenticity is important because we've seen over the last 6 months that body camera footage can trigger massive societal change. If that body camera footage can be altered, if the intent of it can be changed, we've got a problem. Now, luckily at the moment, it isn't too big of a problem, but it could be in the near future. It's a hard problem to solve. So what lessons can we learn from these 4 case studies? Well, first off, don't assume anything about how things work. Bitfire assuming that the RAM was wiped meant that they didn't defend against RAM being read by an attacker. So you need to build in defense in depth. Add multiple levels of security controls to stop these things happening. Physical access needs to be considered. Different devices have got very different exposures here. For a hardware wallet, the attacker wants the keys off that wallet. They want the keys off that individual wallet. So they will spend time and effort. They will spend months possibly attacking that device so they can recover the keys and gain $1 million in Bitcoin. But for a car charger, it shouldn't be a problem that you remove the SD card and read the material off it, because all you can do is pretend to be that single charger. You can't impact more of them. It's not just the devices and users exposed to risk. If you produce an IoT product, then it's your own network that's at risk. We've done this several times. The telematics unit leading to domain admin, the way that we can quite often take control of an MQTT platform or messaging platform using credentials of the device, it's your own network that's at risk here. So be careful and make sure you think about the entire attack surface. If one device is compromised, it shouldn't impact many. I think this is the big thing we're still seeing in IoT. We're still finding shared secrets and things on individual devices that impact others. Some problems are hard to solve, and they do involve compromises. Now, I've pointed out lots of issues with body cameras. The thing is that I'd rather that we had mildly insecure body cameras that are in use today and keeping our police forces in check than we wait another 5 or 10 years to develop a perfectly secure body camera. There's a balance here. If products are too expensive, if products are too complex to use, and if they take too long to get to the market, then they're not solving the problems around the world. Security isn't always the ultimate goal. But also tell your users the threat model. They might have different security goals to you. Now, I think that's really important. So many devices around us, we don't inform users about what they're secure against. Does this have your Wi-Fi password on it? If someone gains access to your phone, can they quite easily get pictures of it? Things like that. So tell your users the threat model, inform them what you've designed the device to withstand. So I hope you've learned something from that. I'm Andrew Tierney. Follow me on Twitter as CyberGibbons if you'd like a bit of fun from time to time. And I'm going to hand back to Steve now. Thank you for listening.
Okay, great job, Andrew. Thanks very much. Excellent presentation. Now we'd like to turn our attention to our sponsor presenter, John Grimm of Encipher Security. Over to you, John.
Great. Thanks very much, Steve. Pleasure to be here. I'm just going to start things off, and this really does follow directly from what Andrew just took you through, which is the fact that so many different IoT devices and applications live in many different environments, and you really need to be cognizant of taking account for what the device does, what type of data it has, where it is in the network environment that it lives in putting together the whole picture of security. An industrial robot that does assembly can pose safety concerns to the workers around it if it malfunctions. A moisture sensor out in a cornfield that's designed to trigger irrigation systems is in a different threat environment, not nearly as severe. Medical devices, a similar way. When medical devices malfunction, people can get hurt. People's health can be impacted, especially if you're talking about a device that performs a surgery or administers medication. Even home devices, as they find their way into workplaces, can be leakage points for sensitive data and proprietary data that's being discussed in a work environment. And as was discussed earlier, cars are complex devices composed of many different IoT devices together, forming a system in a car. And the failures of individual components and their impacts of what's around them needs to be considered. One of the things that we do every year is perform some research with Ponemon Institute, and one of our frequent topics is what are the top threats in the IoT environment. And what was most interesting about the results that we got in our most recent study was an interesting mismatch. So the top rated threat was altering the function of a device. In other words, being able to change it, take remote control of a device, load malware. Although that was the top threat, the security mechanism that would help prevent against that, such as signing of firmware updates, of security patches, et cetera, was rated much lower on the list that people are actually deploying. Similarly, data capture wasn't seen as high of a threat, yet encryption was rated the top used mechanism. So we had this mismatch between the threats and the security mechanisms in use. And I think a little bit of that is attributable to an early stage industry, but also not a rigorous enough process to match security mechanisms to the environment, to the design, and what you're really concerned about. So a little bit reflective of the state of the IoT. I wanted to go through just a few things here on basics, and some of these were touched on in the presentation earlier. But in terms of devices, needing to be able to assess a device's capabilities and consider its potential exploitation points. Does the device use have multiple interfaces? Does it use multiple protocols? What are they? Looking at the data sensitivity of what's collected or processed on the device. Just understanding the overall trust environment, the connectivity. What other devices is the device going to communicate with, and what is known and unknown about that environment. And ability to update the device. This was touched on earlier as well. How can you provide patches, firmware updates? No perfect device and software that runs it has ever been created. In order to keep something secure long term, you need to be able to update it. And not just to be able to update it, but to be able to update it in a way that validates the authenticity and the integrity of that update. And then when it comes to device identity, avoiding any hard-coded credentials. Every device should have unique credentials. You need to have an ability to provision devices or identities that can be cryptographically validated. Digital certificates are a common method to do that, but it's not just about the mechanism itself of certificates. It's about the trust in the software that's doing that and the authority that's validating that identity, that whole trust environment. Are you using things like secure elements or trusted or TPMs to be able to secure any cryptographic keys, any secret keys, where that ability is available and where it's appropriate? And using things like hardware security for server-side applications, too, that validate identities and issue them in the first place. And just the whole concept of device identity and authentication and when users are at play in an IoT environment. How to do that when resources are being accessed and when communications are taking place between devices. And then finally, on the data front, securing data that is flowing between devices or from devices up to servers using standardized crypto methods, choosing good algorithms, choosing and getting strong random numbers to form cryptographic keys. The issue of using the same keys on multiple devices was brought up by Andrew in the earlier session, and that's a no-no because a compromise of one could then lead to a compromise of many. Cryptographically signing data, the integrity of data. I think confidentiality gets a lot of attention in terms of protecting data, but integrity of data, especially things like firmware updates, or for data that's just being collected as part of a process, you need to know that that data is authentic. And cryptographic signing is a way to accomplish that. You need to have device-unique keys for that, and you need to protect those keys accordingly. And then finally, controlling access to sensitive data in a centralized way, coupling your user and device authentication mechanisms with all your access control policies, where you need to encrypt data to make sure you do that when it's at rest and when it's in transit. In an IoT environment, device data can be collected. It can flow through multiple hops before it ends up at its final destination. So a couple examples that we've worked with companies on over time of accomplishing some of these things is embedding what I'll call a root of trust into a device. So we've done this with telephone manufacturers, with set-top box manufacturers, and streaming media players and others. And the concept is, at the time of manufacture, you use a hardware security module and a public key infrastructure to inject unique keys and certificates into those devices, so that when somebody actually buys them and puts them into operation, that certificate can be part of an exchange when the device is first set up to prove the authenticity of the device and to prove the authenticity of the software firmware load that was put onto it at the time of manufacture, so that you can see it is the legitimate system and it hasn't come from the black market or gray market by somebody running unauthorized software and putting it into devices. So we've seen this model repeat several times, especially where manufacturers don't have control of their facilities or they aren't confident in the control of their facilities, to be able to strictly restrict the number of devices that can be produced and to put unique credentials onto them. You also need to think about how that endpoint, how that device is going to be managed over time. But by putting a certificate in at birth, we call them sometimes a digital birth certificate, it can solve a number of other problems, like, for example, the need to generate session keys to exchange data with different devices. That can be done off of a public-private key pair and certificate that is injected at the time of birth and solve some of the problems of needing to generate unique session keys. The other one I really want to highlight, and this is a real gotcha area in a lot of IoT devices, is that ability to update firmware. You need, again, to be able to assure security in a lifecycle fashion, to be able to take security patches, to be able to take firmware updates. The problem is the easiest way to get a piece of malware onto an IoT device is to disguise it as a firmware update or a security patch. And if you haven't implemented things like digital signing with well-protected keys, you can become vulnerable to that. And the thing that a lot of people will forget is the importance of protecting that private signing key. I think encryption keys tend to get all the press. They protect the sensitive data. People talk a lot about encryption and have some understanding of what the keys do there. But in a signing scenario, we find, first of all, that many companies' procedures and processes around protecting signing keys are much more lax. They can be distributed across developers' workstations. They don't always get the attention they deserve. If somebody can capture a private signing key, you can put a perfectly valid signature over any old piece of software you want, including a piece of malware. And down at the endpoint, its signature validates just perfectly. So again, that protection of the private signing key is a really important part of a overall delivery system for secure software out to IoT endpoints. You also have to know what's on the device. Last October, there was a bulletin that came out from the FDA about 11 different vulnerabilities that turned out were present in 6 of the major operating systems used across a large number of medical devices, things like insulin pumps, anesthesia machines, things that could really hurt somebody if they were to go wrong. Knowing if you're an IoT device user, what software is in that IoT device, what open source, what components it's made from is an important thing when it comes time that vulnerabilities are discovered, and you need to know if your particular device is vulnerable or not. And then finally, data protection. I think an underplayed issue in terms of it's an easy problem to solve when you don't have many devices and you've got a relatively small environment. So we find a lot of proof of concepts in the IoT don't brush up against the problems of needing to do widespread data protection. But when you've got tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of devices, and you need to maintain some of these security tenets that Andrew talked about and that I've mentioned as well around unique keys per device and unique credentials, identity credentials per device, it becomes a lot harder to manage. And it's not a problem just about confidentiality of data. If it's collecting sensitive data, say in a healthcare environment, it's the concept of integrity. If the data is being collected from a weather sensor to help settle an insurance claim, no, it's no secret as to what the weather was in a given city on a given date at a given time. But you do, if you're retrieving that data after the fact, need to have some assurance that you are getting the correct data from that correct location, date, and time if you're using it to solve a claim. So integrity is also a serious concern. And really, the fact that data will often flow through many stages from its where it's being collected or generated to its endpoint, and thinking about all the different hops over which it needs to be protected, it gets a little complicated to manage all the keys that you need to do that. It's a little easier if you've done things like I described earlier about injecting public-private key pairs onto devices, because those can be used to dynamically generate session keys when devices need to communicate. It's a lot harder if you need to pre-place things and then replace them periodically. So key management, and that little picture on the right side of the slide is an idea of all the stages that you need to track a key through if you're going to do key management. It's a lot more complicated than a lot of people realize. Again, easy in a real small environment, real hard in a big environment. And at the end of the day, you can't forget the whole reason for doing this in the first place, the whole reason for collecting data off IoT devices is so you can go analyze it and do something useful with it. So if your key management scheme precludes you from your analysis engine, your AI engine, from actually getting access to it, you've done yourself a bit of a disservice. So to wrap up this part of it, a few resources that you all might find useful. The study that I mentioned that we do with the Ponemon Institute, it's a very broad study. The PKI and IoT portion of it covers about 1,600 respondents from 17 countries around the world. So it's one of the broader looks that you'll find at the state of the state in PKI and IoT. I'd urge you to check that out, as well as a solution brief I have listed here that helps mention the role of trusted crypto in the IoT, specifically in the creation of credentials and certificates to go onto devices, and of managing encryption keys, which you heard about across both of the sessions here, the importance of that. So a lot of those resources are available on Encipher.com, as well as we do a lot of webcasts and the like with our partners on the Encipher Bright Talk channel, and have a lot on our blog as well. And lastly, I'll mention our key management books. Again, that it's a topic that a lot of people don't realize how complex it gets when you get to scale. We have a book that kind of breaks down some of the basics of key management. If you're A, thinking about design of an IoT device, or B, evaluating the design of it, and if its security properties are fit for a particular environment, it provides a measuring stick that you can use there. So that's all I've got, and now I'll turn it back to Steve for the Q&A part of the program. Thank you.
Okay, super job, John. Thanks very much. Excellent presentation. As we go to our audience Q&A, we'd also like to remind our audience of a couple things. First off, we have a feedback survey on our console. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could fill that out and give us some feedback. Also want to remind you of our next webcast on July 30th, Understanding and Disrupting Offensive Innovations. So we're going to push out a link here so that you can go to the registration page, and hope to see you in a couple of weeks there. And also want to remind you that we have PDFs of the presentations on our resources in the console. So without any further ado, we've got a number of great questions. Let's start here. Our first one early on from Stuart, who says, admin portals and risk from the administrators. If you could discuss a little bit more, Andrew, on that score?
Yeah, so I guess we touched on it with the body cameras, the concept of insider threat there. We've looked at tens of IoT platforms now that have been developed in-house, and I can count on one finger the ones that adequately control access to the data and devices on that cloud platform. So it's crucial. If you're operating a consumer IoT platform, your customer service representatives have some kind of access to be able to troubleshoot and interact with the devices in people's homes. It's very, very common to not find that that's adequately secured. Again, it comes down to this idea that you've got to consider the entire attack surface. You've got to consider someone on the inside of your own company turning against you. And what John was talking about there with key management as well, we quite often find that things like signing keys for firmware are entrusted to one person, you know, and we end up with that situation where we don't have availability or confidentiality, really. You know, someone could just go, yeah, I want to ruin this platform, and they'll do it. So it's quite often not considered.
Okay, wonderful. Peter wants to know, I guess back to you, Andrew, is this realistic in a sensor-hungry environment setting, hundreds of unique keys?
So I don't think we've really solved the problem of having systems with huge numbers of devices connected to them. So when I go and buy a Nest camera or a Ring doorbell, I provision it onto my Wi-Fi network, and it provisions itself onto the cloud, and it gets its keys. But that's quite an onerous process. I have to spend time and effort doing that. And say, for example, you're tracking the temperatures of refrigerated containers. So you've got 150,000 sensors out in the field. Provisioning them to your platform suddenly starts becoming quite a complex task. It really depends, to be honest. I think we're working towards making that process of provisioning devices so smooth that they can have individual keys. But you've also got to put that up against processing power and capability. If a device is meant to have a 10-year battery life, it probably can't really encrypt and sign data in the way that we intend, in the way that we want. So we've got to look at the harsh reality of power constraints and processor constraints there. Another model we see is where we augment the trust of that data further downstream. So say, for example, I mean, in my house, I've got temperature sensors. They just send the data in the plane over 868 megahertz. It's not signed. Nothing happens there because someone would have to be in the periphery of my house to, you know, inject data there. When they hit the gateway that collects that data, that's when the data gets signed. So the keys are stored in a much more powerful mains electricity-powered device. There's lots of different ways of dealing with it. Again, I don't think these problems, there's no clear solution. I think John may have some input on this, though.
The piece I would add there, thanks, Andrew, is that we start to see people using crypto that's a little better right-sized to IoT environments. So, for example, using elliptic curve crypto, whose keys and certificates are significantly shorter than traditional RSA keys and certificates, and the mathematical operations behind them are lower power consuming, easier to deal with for a small processing device. So we're starting to see the crypto get right-sized, and then use asymmetric crypto that's, you know, installed either at manufacturer or during an initial registration. Use that to generate symmetric keys as needed, and to manage that process a little in a more dynamic fashion rather than the pre-placement and maintenance of single static symmetric keys on devices over time, which is cumbersome.
Okay, great. David is asking, do standards such as EN 303-645 or government legislation have a role to play in ensuring developers do not overlook common vulnerabilities such as default passwords? What are your thoughts?
So that's an interesting one. So EN 303-645, if you go and Google it, is an ETSI standard. It's just become a standard from a draft. It covers 13 points that should secure an IoT device. Most of them are really, really basic. Things like it shouldn't have default passwords. There should be a vulnerability disclosure policy. The software should be updated. It should have a minimum lifetime period. It's not hard stuff. I think it's a step towards improving things. The problem is that we tend to find with IoT, we've got people who want to do it right, and they are doing it right, and they're doing it very right. They're speaking to people like me. They're speaking to people like John and learning how to do it right. So they build a secure system. And we've then got people who just want to get a product onto the market quickly, and there's not really any consideration for security. they could probably get their products to pass these 13 points, but they still haven't really developed anything that's truly secure. I never want to say something's bad because it's not perfect. It's not perfect, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, great. Maybe for each of you here, does supplying certificates onto IoT devices and using key stores mitigate any of the risks?
So I'd be happy to start there. We have seen a lot of people turning to certificates, but I would point out that it's not just the mechanism of the certificate itself. It's the trust that goes into the production of the public-private key pair and the identity of the certificate that it represents. That whole process and how it gets initiated and bootstrapped into the device in the first place is a big part of whether that certificate can play a role in assuring the system security of that device in the long term. You know, used properly, it can do really good things like establishing unique credentials, like providing a basis for which session keys can be negotiated with other pieces. But also you have to look at that device. Is that device capable of protecting the private keys associated with that properly, right? Does it have a TPM or an SC or a reasonably secure place to store it? Because once the security of the key is gone, the value of all the crypto that it's being used for diminishes. So I think certificates are an important part of an answer, not for every single IoT device, but for a lot of IoT devices used to help with identities and things like firmware validation, things that are really core to the security of the device. Andrew, you probably have some things to add to that as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the life cycle you showed of key management, you know, showing it being used, revoked, generated, all these different steps, it's actually really complex. So a vulnerability we find quite commonly is that the device generates its own private key, and then it takes that private key, generates a public key, and then it will send it through to a cloud to be provisioned. The problem is if that way that it sends the public key through to the cloud isn't adequately secured, as an attacker, we can inject our own malicious or incorrect public keys and end up with our fake devices provisioned to the cloud. And it's just one of those things where every device should have its own identity. That identity should be cryptographically assured. You know, firmware should be signed. But there's so many different aspects of an IoT device. It just gets really complex quite quickly. The big problem is, and I think one of the other questions was kind of maybe alluding to this, was that we quite often see things like people take the MAC address of a device and pass it through a hash function and then use that as a private key. And it's, you know, things like that just purely aren't secure. There's no way you can ever call that secure. One of the big issues I find is that this stuff isn't turnkey. If someone decides they want to make an IoT product, most of this stuff they have to kind of build from scratch themselves. The people who make the silicon, the people who make the platforms, aren't really speaking to each other and doing an end-to-end solution. So they're saying that, I mean, what John's doing is working towards making that much more accessible.
Okay, well, unfortunately, gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this session. So great questions, great discussion. I want to thank you for the presentations as well. And we just want to let our audience know, again, please fill out the feedback form. We hope to see you for July 30th. And thank you for attending today's Black Hat webinar for IoT systems for threat modeling failures, brought to you by Black Hat and Cipher Security, an Entrust data card company, and Informa. Shortly after this live event, we'll send you an email reminder so you can access this presentation on demand. And on behalf of our guest, Andrew Tierney, hardware team leader with Pen Test Partners, and our sponsor presenter, John Grimm, Vice President Strategy with Cipher Security, we want to thank you for your time and have a great day.
We're out here on location for the DEFCON 201 hangout here. Oh, and let me make this full screen. Forgot about that. Because if everyone can hear that, how's everyone out there in chat? Because we're gonna bring some of our people who have attended physically over and stuff. But this is kind of the moment where we get to talk to you guys as the police go and arrest everybody. Okay. So that we have the audio working. There's no audio? Hold on. Are you sure there's no audio, Deep CAD 3? Because I can hear us on our stream. I can hear myself on Twitch. Let me see if there's a, because I do know, as we posted above, that Cloud Player is down. So I don't know if that's affected DLive. I'm actually going to load into DLive right now and just hear. Oh, and the Busy Bees followed us on DLive. Thank you for DLive. Okay. Okay, that was a delay then. All right. So let's switch this back. Put the volume down. So that was our chat. In a moment, so the game plan is that around at 6:30, we're gonna log into as my chin strap here. We're gonna I might be black hair up here, but I'm actually a natural orange down here. We're going to go. We're going to go into this awesome Zoom meeting held by a friend of mine who we're going to show the first 10 minutes of her beginning Python class, and then right at 6:40, we're going to bring on a great group of speakers. I'm actually going to bring up our posted here, what we call Scratch Space, because here's a funny thing. I name all the meetings, and there was a whole naming scheme before COVID happened, and then after COVID happened, we all had names for the different meetings. This is how you know we're doing it on location outside here, folks. That's the sound of Jersey City. But no, is that this was the only meeting that I didn't have a name for. So I literally came up 10 minutes before we did so. And you'll probably see some of our members in the background here. But basically, our overall talk listing is the amazing Zoe from OWASP, who leads a lot of the women's groups out there for Infosec and computer hacking, is going to be talking about building your cybersecurity career. It's going to be a fun, interactive 20-minute thing. And then we're going to give 15 minutes to the Project Truth people, and they're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter and how they use digital graffiti to do social justice for that. And then lastly, but not least, our biggest talk is we're going to bring in Shivaram, I hope I pronounced their name correctly, I apologize if I didn't, about Oregano, which is a IRC server that is completely compliant with IRC3 methodologies. And I love that one of the people I was going to bring over on the camera to talk with you guys is currently not here, but I do have someone that you guys probably have not seen in a very long time. Hey, yo, you have fans. Say hi.
Are they AC or DC?
I think they're only fans. The Zen Commander, or you guys have mentioned. Yes, he's actually...
let me block the sun.
Yes, he's actually kind of alive. I mean, kind of. And there he goes, because that's how fast my COVID works.
No, that was your blockchain, not your COVID.
Oh, jeez. No, Jack currently has that, although he doesn't have it with him. But no, yeah, he's...
Your blockchain or your COVID?
Both. Don't ask me how he got it, if it was orally or rectally. We still don't know. But no, he's actually alive. He's just been having a nightmare of a month.
Yeah.
Well, kind of a nightmare of a year. I mean, everyone's having a nightmare of a year, but still.
Yeah, to put this normally, they kept coming up with good ideas to torture me, but as it turns out, what I do to myself is worse than what they can come up with. On the plus side, I do have a copy of WordPerfect 9 for Linux in the box.
What, here or at your place?
I can bring it for next month.
Okay.
For the torture.
It'll be a DEFCON thing, yeah.
I also have NetWare 2.0A.
We might be able to get the dominance. Well, we have a lot to catch up to with episodes. Hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday. If not, I will have
Worst case scenario, I will inflict me playing Minecraft.
If not, well, we could do a Minecraft thing. There's actually Minecraft extensions I can put on Twitch, as well as that. You know, if you miss the next one when we do a special broadcast, I'm gonna like make an End Commander like hand puppet, and we'll do like puppet pals.
No, we are not doing the End Commander puppet. At least be the End Commander Ansible.
Oh man.
Can they actually hear me? Or?
Yeah, no. I checked the audio before. Everything's perfectly fine.
Right, which means it was fine right up until you hit start stream, because that's how this all works.
No, it's been streaming. We were just doing a pre-recorded video before this. That's why I could leave and come back to this.
And
so yeah, if anyone has
Wild Seer Cell shows up.
Yes, if anyone has questions to End Commander, Seer Cell, or myself, whether it's about computer hacking or our sex lives or the recent high scores we have on the Raspberry Pi machines, or the lack thereof of high scores or sex lives or lives in general, please let us know in chat.
Well, I don't know. I would think COVID would be great for
when we do have protection, there was an awesome. Actually, I'm going to turn on the other camera here to show this. There was an awesome guy who apparently walked out to get something. Who actually brought a bunch of face masks. Cops! You're welcome! Who brought out face masks for all of us, just in case there were people who didn't have face masks to show up. So, thank you, person that I can't remember the name of as I go back to the other camera. But yeah, that's what kind of honestly sucks about DEFCON 201 is that we have amazing people that show up to our meetings and online and on the live stream chat and stuff. So we have to equal that level of not suck. And do you know how hard it is for us to not suck?
Well, you live with Jack.
Yes, we barely get by as it is. You've seen Archvile Linux Perspective. You've seen Hackle End Commander. You've seen Master of Unlocking where I start 5 hours late.
You know what our next show should be? Inside Fail Factory, hosted by Neo.
I've actually wanted to pitch that to him. The only thing is, I think the only way he'd be able to do that, because he doesn't have a camera person, is a body cam.
No, you put the Neo hand puppet.
I don't want to know how you create the Neo hand puppet.
Well, first you need a really big glove.
That's going to be a lot. Well, if you want to be authentic, we're going to have to source gray human hair, and that's a lot of gray human hair.
I thought last time I saw him he had shaved.
He did. It's still a lot.
Oh, so he's gone from Mastiff to Chihuahua?
Yeah. Wait, did you just? Oh, I thought you said half mass.
No, Mastiff.
Because there's an in joke with half staff, half mass, and Neo that we're not bringing up on the screen because we're not that evil.
To End Commander.
Yeah.
Because for those who are not aware, I used to have hair.
Mm-hmm.
No,
he's just like a seagull's gonna fly at him in the face.
What's interesting is that last time I saw you on the 201 camera, we discovered that you're a cactus with a fro.
Yes.
Now we've got the headphones. Now it just looks like someone has gone.
I look like a character from Hackers 2. Yes, I know.
Wait, there's a Hackers 2?
There technically is, but I'm just saying if there was an official sequel to Hackers, I look like one of those. That's why I'm repping the bin shell shirt.
And of course, it's mirrored.
Yes. Seriously, how are the things with the stuff?
The things with the stuff.
What have you been building? You've been building a lot. So you always have 8 million projects. Is there anything you want to dox on, or?
The first things first. I'm working on a Linux distribution. It's called Sticks. Yeah. The main thing about Sticks is I'm gonna uproot fucking everything about
Sticks uproot.
So I'm basically uprooting the whole idea of a Linux package manager outright. So rather than having complicated configurations and installations and having things permanently modify your system root and mess up shit if you get it wrong, you just drag and drop the files where they need to go.
So
if you want to run an application, you double click it. It's like Windows or Mac, it just works, quote unquote.
So
it's the thing that's been missing from Linux for 3 decades now.
You know what bothers me most about that? It just works as what Mark Shuttleworth used to describe Unity.
Yeah, no, let's not go there.
Let's not go there.
Yeah. No, we're
speaking of
Unity, more people that have actually shown up here.
I heard something about Unity, and I'm waiting for Disco Fries. Yo, what's up, y'all?
This is
They got this
We
this
are-
is
we-
Squirtle.
What we have here is a social distancing violation.
We have anti-social people being social during social
And-
distancing.
breaking the law, breaking the law.
See, it turns out that we're not antisocial, we're just nonconformists.
Well, you know when the stream stops when the official Gestapo shows up.
See, the problem with wearing a mask is I can't give you... All you can see are my eyes and not really.
That's what she said.
That way it doesn't get overheated by
Well,
the sun.
yeah, so that's why your sex life is so much better.
I wouldn't say that. I would say there's more ports involved, but not necessarily better. We all know that just because you add a bunch of USB ports to something doesn't make the device better.
Well, it depends on how well you know your IP tables.
I've done a lot of stuff on tables. Speaking of stuff, could you get out so put Squirtle on for a moment? Come on. People haven't seen you here. This is a guy I've been trying to get to do a live stream show with us, and he's so too cool for school, as he dresses like a character who's on a coffee label.
You look like you belong in Mortal Kombat.
Listen, I'm
What
Raiden's.
what farmer with a K?
I'm Raiden's son. I'm Raiden.
No, he's just,
No, you're not Kid Raiden. Are you kidding
he's
me?
just Squirtle from Ashes of the Past.
Oh, jeez.
What's up?
We were supposed to make him famous when we were going to go to Anime Next in New Jersey, but that was one of the many casualties of COVID, as well as sanity and
So is there
the last semblance of socialization.
Is our end of the year talk going to be all the things DEFCON 201 was supposed to do? Because I'm pretty sure.
That's a long
That
list
was
of
weird.
depression.
Holy crap, that was weird.
What happened?
I think we picked up a weird crosstalk. I actually heard one of the radios on here
Oh.
for like 2 seconds.
Oh, that's how FTL works.
I know, right?
It bends because
Talk about WebRTC leaks, right? Like, Jesus Christ. So yeah, what should we know about you besides that you're like a bad mutant clone to me?
A lot of people have said that. Even you've said it to a very,
Unfortunately, yes.
very weird extent. Mainly about me. I spend way too much time in my own basement.
That works. That's pretty much all of us who actually have basements. But no,
yeah,
we
wait,
can't
wait,
access
wait.
our basement.
Oh
wait,
God,
wait a
no!
minute, Squirtle.
What
You're
up?
being all fancy here with an actual basement. Most of us just have an apartment.
I live with.
Sometimes
my
it's the same thing. I'm not even kidding. That's not a
But a
joke.
basement has to be below ground. This guy's being an overachiever.
What do you mean?
But you have an actual basement
I'm
below
gonna do this just to
ground
hear
level.
better.
In
But,
Long Island, I used to sleep in an alcove above a closet. Don't talk
In a-
about basement
In a
shit with me.
matchbook on Long Island, past Montauk.
Past Montauk.
As
yeah.
the,
Is that like the budget board when they can't afford a proper alcove?
But no, my favorite thing is if you ever see, what's your Instagram again? It's like SQL Light or something?
SQRTL3.
Alright, there's no underscore in it?
No.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
on Instagram?
that's actually, I can see.
Okay, because I usually follow, our group follows him on Instagram, and all he does is complain, bitch about server stuff, and him shitting his pants when he gets shinies. It's the best Twitter. It's literally the best Twitter. It's his entire Twitter is just that. It's during COVID. It's been amazing.
Well, we've been trying to get him to evolve, but he keeps pressing B. It's like being on Twitch plays Pokemon.
That's my secret weapon though.
bum,
Everyone's trying to press A or B. I'm just going square.
I've actually.
The world is square.
That was a bad. No, I was actually thinking of like if you could do a show, you could do like you try to search for all those bugs that drive you crazy. It's because I think like finding bugs is like finding shinies, except disappointing. Am I right? Am I wrong?
You know what we should
There's
be
so
doing?
many tiers behind that. It's insane.
You know what we should, hold
just-
on. I have to block out the sun, literally. But you know what we should be doing while we're all outside?
What?
Call you Umbrella
PA?
Jesus.
Playing Pokemon Go.
We can play video games. We might do that later if we have a little bit of time on here. Because
Yeah,
let's
seriously, the sun is kind of problematic.
let's double check. Because in 2 minutes I'm going to attempt to try the Zoom. If not, we're just going to fart around more. We might start off the talks early. Does any of you fine gentlemen want to wave hi on the camera? Are you guys good being antisocial and stuff?
You want to come in?
Yeah.
Okay,
Wants to come in.
let's make some room.
Yeah, it's fine. So there's
Let me
two
make
guys
sure
show up.
I'm
This
gonna-
guy's
let me-
been
let me be Umbrella
this guy's
Jesus.
been here before. It's the power of the fro as I block the sun. This guy's been here. This guy's been due for locks. What are you on now? You're actually picking the padlocks now.
Yeah, 4.
Awesome. Yeah, you got up to 4 pins. It's me. I have a show this Sunday called Master of Unlocking. Watch it. Then you'll end up be like this sexy fella back
Ju-
here with his brass boy.
Just as a warning, false advertising.
I didn't know you've seen me without my pants. So
That's not a good sight. Why did you make him stand on camera?
That's a hazmat warning.
No.
Now we need the
That's
suits.
Chernobyl. That's not a hazmat warning. It's death.
No. It's properly contained. It's a 3 Mile Island.
Yes.
It's the
I'm one
elephant.
nuclear rod and 2 Putins. Yes.
No. I've been there. It's the elephant's foot.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Oh, so no, seriously, I need you back. One last thing before we get on there. Question, because this is something you might be able to actually talk about for once. That's not classified more than me.
Okay.
So as you fight through all the handsome hair here, what is you've been since COVID collecting even more hardware stuff than usual. Do you want to talk about any of the cool stuff you've collected?
Yeah. Basically, I've just been. Well, before COVID, I bought 17 ThinkPads.
I love how, so by the way, how he says that he thinks Squirtle looks like a Mortal Kombat character, but I mean, this is some Mad Max right here. It's beautiful.
Your hair looks very gray, and
I mean,
glowing.
there's a reason. For
Great,
that.
yeah, Long Island.
He's a Cabalskin.
Some call me Jesus. I don't take that name very by choice, but I've walked into a 7-Eleven wearing a robe and had some people
With
very
nothing else
confused
on.
about my intentions.
It was glorious. There was a light emanating from below. It was beautiful. Anyhow, so some of the cool hardware
Anyway.
collected.
Right, and on that note.
Yeah, recently I've just been, well, before COVID, I got a bunch of laptops together because I was teaching a class at MagFest on how to use a NES music creation program. So to make 8-bit chiptune music on the Nintendo, in the old days you had to write assembly code and do all sorts of hacking. Now it's just you have a tracker writing keygen music, and you just write in the tables and it compiles you an NES ROM with it. So cool. I taught a few people how to do that. It was kind of a failure at the midpoint because there was a lot of BS that happened immediately before I went to MagFest, so I couldn't prepare anything. So,
And if I remember real quick, because unfortunately we have to get to the new thing, you also converted your MagFest badge into a TV tuner. You actually showed that off on one of our live streams.
yeah, so the MagFest badge is based on an ESP8266 Wi-Fi chip, used in a lot of IoT bullshit things, but a lot of maker kind of people use it because it's incredibly powerful and incredibly cheap. So I, using CN Lore's glorious Channel 3 program, I flashed that to the ESP, and I was able to broadcast to a TV next to the badge in real time. I was planning on, whoops, there's angry dogs. I was planning on
I
using
just thought
to
that
play
was
video
Cloud
games.
Stream failing again.
But yeah, I was planning on making a video game system out of that.
Cool. So as we get distracted by crying and cute doggos here, we're going to spend a couple of minutes. We're going to attempt to load up this separate Zoom. I'm going to post later on the details where if you want to do this.
I thought it was Jitsi.
No. My friend's Python course is in that separately.
Right.
So we're going to air a couple of minutes on that for free. We would have done this all because that class lets on to 8 p.m., but we have a bunch of amazing speakers on Jitsi that are coming up.
Yeah.
Well, I'll post the details in a bit of if you want to follow that course for beginners Python. Like if you ever want to know how to program, or you've done some programming, or like even HTML web code, which is arguably programming, not programming, and want to know, we'll post those details in. So if you want to learn the Python course while you listen to our speakers, you can. But we're going to attempt to cut to them. If the thing doesn't work, I'll still post the details, and we'll start the speaking early. So.
And Zoe's supposed to be on at what time?
She's going to be on at 6:40, so in the next like 8-9 minutes. Yep. So here we go. We're going to try to switch over now. I get to do all this fun stuff. Actually, what I'm going to do, just in case, is we will be right back. We're not going anywhere. We're just typing in some stuff.
Hi everyone. I'm gonna start now. So welcome. Does everyone have the Python 3.8 downloaded? Just put a thumbs up in the chat.
Oh, I forgot to make this full screen.
I should probably monitor.
Great.
Yeah, let me know.
Okay. So I'm gonna start with sharing my screen and explaining to you guys about Python if you don't know what it is yet. Okay.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
So I will begin.
I'm probably gonna start her at 6:45. So I'm probably gonna start her at 6:45.
Okay.
So yeah.
I know you guys are all muted, but welcome to Python Party. It's a complex programming language, and I'm trying to keep it simple for anyone who's starting with programming languages like I did a few years ago. Python's pretty easy. It's actually one of the easiest programming languages out there right now. What is programming? Python? It was created by Guido van Rossum in 1989. It's a high-level interpreted language with easy syntax and a dynamic semantic. Okay, so why is it popular? So, well, right here is missing the Python logo, but it's free, it's easy. You make applications with it. There's lots of libraries that people have created to make it easier and lots of support. So the library we'll be using today is Turtle. It's really cool because with Turtle, you make like graphics. So it's more visually fun for the beginner programmer. So features of Python. So it's simple, it's open source, it's portable. So that means you can sign in from different computers remotely, obviously. Embeddable, extendable. So you can extend it with all the libraries that people have created. It's an interpreted language, and there's huge libraries. So there's pandas. We're using Turtle. There's matplotlib. There's so many. And it's an object-oriented language. Okay. Where is it used in the industry? So the companies that use Python is Google. I actually went to Google and spoke to the people that work there, the engineers, and they said that mostly Python is used a lot there. So if you know Python, great. They made a joke about Java. It was really funny. So it's a better search results provided based on ranking of the website and more. So like basically whatever you look on and search, it's going to give you more of that showing up in your thing. Netflix uses machine learning, so the more shows you see about nature, they're going to give you more nature shows. That's made with Python. Dropbox, so the server and the apps are coded using Python. NASA uses Python. They use these scientific calculations, so like big math problems can be done on Python. BitTorrent, so being able to transfer from file person to person is easier with Python. Cyber security, so you can encrypt your documents and things like that. So if you want to get into learning Python, you got to know about variables, data types, operators, arrays, flow control methods, file handling, object-oriented language, and you got to just practice a lot. I'm going to be going over variables, operators, and arrays. And the methods, I will be touching on that, but not really getting there. Okay, career opportunities. So I'm sure if you're interested in learning programming, it's maybe because to expand your career or something. So you can use this skill for web development and frameworks. So mainly like the back end, web testing. So testing a website before the public can see it. Game development. So you can create like with the turtle graphics that I'm going to show you today, you can actually create a Pong game, like the first game that was created, you know, with the little ball. Then you have AI, data science. That's like a whole nother ball game. You have big data, so like you get really big data sets, like how many city bikes are in New York City and where they parked, and you can find out where they are specifically located at what times with Python. And you can use them smart devices like your phone. I have an Alexa, I'm an Amazon Alexa. I have you know, an LED light that changes colors, like that's all coded with Python. And other programming language too. Okay. You guys still with me? So just a thumbs up in the chat if you're still with me. Yeah, cool. All right. Hope that wasn't too like, you know, long-winded, but anyways. So we're gonna start with Turtle. So do you guys have your Python 3.8 open? Yep. Okay. Yep. So we're gonna start. All this code that I have here, I kept on GitHub, so you can look at it later on. But what we're gonna do first is we're going to import Turtle. Now, Turtle is a library. Are you guys still with me? You can see my
We've
screen?
all been banned from things and people. Don't worry.
Great. Okay. Cool. So import Turtle. Then what we're going to do is after we import the library Turtle that someone created for us, we're going to create a variable called win. And that's going to be my window for
Hello everyone. So yeah, that was part of my friend's Python training course going on. We're gonna get into speakers real quick. I just want to let you know that if you want to, we would love to have aired her course during the entire meeting, but we have a huge amount of amazing speakers right now. But we just want to mention that if you want to follow along with that course, as you listen to our sort of thing, we are going to post the links real quick and then go to our first speaker. So in chat, that is the link right there. We also have it on our Medium blog, which is medium.com/@defcon201.org. But that's the Zoom meeting you can click on. We're also going to share here the meeting ID to get in. There we go. And we're also going to share the password, which is really simple, on there. And it's an open meeting. Anyone can get in. If you're new to Python and programming, it's a great course to follow. So you can click on that Zoom. You can load it in the browser and follow that along as you listen to our awesome speakers. In the future, that same awesome person is going to be doing an intermediate Python course with us. So that will be coming soon. Anyhow, not to further delay because we want to get into a bunch of stuff here. And sorry, I have to reorganize my chair without falling over. There we go. I want to introduce our first speaker here, if I can. This person is someone who has been wanting to get onto the DEFCON 201 stuff for a while. We met them at the CCon convention that happens in New Jersey. It's a social engineering convention. We had a table there, and she was one of the awesome people that showed up. And she does amazing work with OWASP and so many different groups. And she wants, because thanks to COVID and we're all online, she wants to do a cool course. We're going to give her about 15 to, I think, 18 minutes on here just because we're a little over. But without further ado, we're going to see if this Jitsi Meet works, and we're going to do Zoe here. Zoe, are you in the chat?
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me too?
There's Puking Monkey, sorry. There we go. Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome.
So take it away. There she is.
Can you see me?
We can see you. I just want to make sure we can see you in OBS. I'm just going to ask in chat, hey, can you see and hear our speaker? But yes, we can hear and see you fine. If you want to go, take it away, because all of this is also pre-recorded. And I mean, this is all recorded, so afterwards, if anyone missed this or wanted to catch up again, they can go in and chat. So go right ahead.
Awesome. Okay, so I can share my screen. Okay, great. You want to see the screen?
Are you asking if we could see the share screen? Because we don't see the screen shared right now.
Oops.
It's okay.
Oh.
Eventually we're going to have Big Blue
Okay,
Button and
now.
solve all of this. Hang on a moment. Hey, Siricel, can you help talk Zoe through? She's having difficulty sharing her screen on Jitsi. Oh, there she did. She just
How about
got
now?
it. Sweet, yeah.
Woo, okay.
And when you're done talking, let me know, because you can sit back here if you want.
Oh, right.
Okay. I mean, where I am, if you want.
Great. Okay. So, basically in December 2016, I believe, I had an accident, and it was a very, very happy accident. I got involved with OWASP, trying to, get out of my introverted shell and go to some tech meetups. And I had no idea that it was cybersecurity. I had no idea what AppSec meant, on the offensive or defensive side. But I realized that the community was great, and then this type of the bottom type of networking kind of turned into more networking in the technical sense, and I just kept I kept it up, and I just really there's a continuous culture of wanting to give back. And I think that, like with everything that's always changing in terms of what's out there, what, what types of systems, what types of vulnerabilities there are out there, everything changes, regarding technology, and also teams, and a big variable in what makes what you do on a daily basis worth it or not so worth it is the teams and the underlying community, and really what you're doing and with whom on a daily basis. And so yeah, I started late in the slide deck to try to stay on the topic of career desk. So the Open Web Application Security Project, in addition to starting the projects like the OWASP Top 10, and that's on every bug bounty platform, that is the basis of web application security, offensive and defensive as a framework. But we are also community behind it. In fact, we have a whole hacker outreach program that we're continuing to build, and I'm glad to be part of, alongside great leaders like John McCoy, Spiros Gastorados, Grant Ungers, Sam Stepanyan, Haral Tsitsavas. I think I pronounced that correctly. He's just Haral in my mind, and he's great like the others. And Boy, I don't think the slide decks necessarily add anything anyway. They're just kind of okay, yeah. Cool. Let me switch. Okay, let's sit on chair.
Guys know that there having been technical difficulties here with the slide deck. We might be able to. Can you just run the slide deck without making it full screen? That usually sometimes works in like Google and Safari and stuff like that. If not,
Sure.
just
Again, that they're just visuals anyway. Sometimes I get a little. I
That's
tend
fine.
to go on tangents anyway, and I almost pride myself in that.
That's fine. Just continue. You have until basically 7. So
Great. Okay, so there are so part of what makes OS amazing is that you can contribute to the ongoing projects that they have, again, whether it be a guide, a tool, depending on what's needed, and get to work with the greatest people and learn from each other and go to meetups. And as far as what that means for a career, I think I find that it's really beneficial to be able to have something outside of a given job, so that you can kind of have a comfort zone and something more sustainable to draw back on, people to exchange resources with, people to bounce around ideas of what could both shape the future of AppSec in any given aspect of it, and also any community driven effort, and mentorship, and who might be available, who might who might be hiring, and who you might get to work with on a daily basis in addition. And I find, again, in uncertainty, and COVID is a big reminder of this. There's you kind of never know what will happen, and there's, again, that's a good question. so yeah, I think I unshared my screen at this point, I think, because switching slide decks are just okay. Cool. So I think there are a bunch of questions that you have to ask yourself, such as team size, what you want to do, and let yourself explore, because there's a lot you won't know until you get into a given role, and being able to do it through through an open source community and outside of a specific job is absolutely golden as an opportunity, and it gives a similar feel, kind of like a hacker family, but also on the defensive side, and with corporate connections, and and continuing to reach out and give back. Like I know that your group does a lot of teaching and training, on the coding side, as well as on specific hacking education, and also specific projects that community members are making. So it's really the same area that, and job descriptions continue to change too. There's AppSec engineer, even something as casual as just stepping in within a given developer role to kind of be the security champion as a segue. So I kind of had started to do that with each other software development related project, whether it be on the architecture side or the dev side, and just kind of practicing and routinizing what might be needed. There are people who go and give trainings, either for a company or on their own and building their own business. I don't do that because, as you can see, I'm still really nervous being able to finally address you guys. But there are people who do that, and there's just so much you can do and continuously learn, and diversity is very important too, because whether it be your background, again, what have you done previously, that you're trying to develop empathy and relate to the people who you're trying to educate about security, and try to go through exercises and activities like threat modeling throughout the process of design and software development to be able to really reach them and kind of speak to them and understand what both the attacks and mitigation side, and really any additional knowledge that you might have you're able to contribute, but also the ability to find people that you communicate well with, and also comfort for communication, and also kind of filling each other's knowledge gaps, filling each other's information gaps, and continuously learning, because again, so much is changing, and it really again, it really depends on the role, but and I mean, a lot of it is a lot of mentorship is kind of question and answer based. If you're going for a specific goal, or if you don't know what you're going for with a specific goal, then you can reach out to someone who does something very specific. And if you go on the OWASP page, the OWASP website, for example, and you look up leaders of a specific project used for a specific purpose, then you can reach out to them about their expertise. Again, whether it be code review, threat modeling, testing, a certain type of application. And they can get quite specific.
I just want to note you have roughly 5 minutes left. I hate to rush you, but I just wanted to let you know.
Wait, no, it makes sense. I mean, again, and my point, a lot of it is following up and being able to continue with the community. So I would also like to use this as an opportunity to just encourage you to keep in touch. My Twitter handle is @ZBraderman, and I'm sure the group can also share it, and has shared a bunch of times on Twitter. But just continuing to reach out again is really the key. There's really no way to fully describe it. I try every time, but try to describe it in one essence. But to be able to have people to ask specific questions to, there's really no substitute.
Before we go on, I guess we'll have 2 minutes for questions. I think our chat is absolutely flabbergasted with what you had to say. But I just shared your Twitter handle here. So my question, and I'll try to get some of these knuckleheads to ask questions over here. And by the way, if you hear a giant alarm, that's a building across the street. That's how you know we're doing this live. We have no idea what that's for. If the Gestapo comes out, you'll know the screen will crash.
Just stay safe.
Wrong browser window here. There we go. So one of the things that we had to make a note is that you're in the lead of a lot of different things. You are the one of the chair people of the OWASP Women in AppSec group, as well as one of the OWASP NYC chapter leaders and Infosec Girls chapter lead. What would you say to your advice to those who have been looking into more of a mentor position because they've been told they have the skills to teach on, but are kind of afraid or nervous about what they need to do in order to mentor others about their own skills and process?
So one thing that I definitely suggest is choose your platform and your schedule. Kind of make some sort of availability, because I know that some of my friends and colleagues have been overly enthusiastic about mentoring, and they kind of over commit. So make sure that you have your own way going. I know that I mentor best by message, so I can answer specific questions, because that's generally how I operate. Again, having various roles kind of makes that even more important, because really, what are the next steps that I want to suggest to people, and what do they want to learn about? What again? Who do they want to connect with? What don't they know? And a lot of the times, they really don't know, because even job roles and specifications will change, and again, there's a lot of unknowns about questions, even when it's not known that they're unknown. And being able to try to reach out to people that are more like you, again, which is why diversity from various angles is very important. I know one thing I get from women in AppSec is women from around the world that are different. And Infosec Girls is based in India, so very, very highly technical women. So I get to learn a lot, kind of playing catch up, not having as much technical background usually.
Yep.
And so that is actually golden, and Vaughn never leads that, and she's also very much
Awesome.
leader. Yeah.
Awesome, Zoe. I wish we had more time while apparently a building near door is catching on fire, because welcome to New Jersey and Jersey City. I think we're okay for now, but before we go, you can hear that in the background probably. So I'm going to attempt to do this real quick before we switch on to our next speaker. And Commander, your friends have shown up.
I spot a wild ladder truck.
And of course, the traffic won't get out of the way, which is why all the vehicles are into this. But hang on one moment.
I'm after this.
See, what happened was Jack went on the toilet again before I could fix it. And so, before we go to our next speaker, does anyone have any questions for Zoe about InfoSec careers? Anybody?
Again, I continue reaching out with specific targeted questions.
Yeah. I think Sarasot's going to come over to ask one question here, so here we go.
What's up?
Great.
Do you have a question for Zoe about InfoSec careers?
No, it was great. I love this talk.
You might want to get out of the camera. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Zoe. As people move in and out of here, I'm going to sort that all out for talking again. I'm going to repost in her in the chat. There we go. Where you can follow her on Twitter. Now, the next after that lovely talk about careers as the building still continues to go on fire, our next speaker, which we're going to give 15 minutes to, is something I'm really excited for. I just randomly found them when we were trying to educate people who might be out there on the Black Lives Matter movement. I should actually switch over to my camera real quick. The BLM movement, about how to make your devices more private and securely, and to be more secure out there during the protests and everything. Is there a piece of news? Oh, you want to go in the building. Okay. And I thought this was awesome because a little bit of background, I was one of the people in New York involved at the Graffiti Research Lab, which was a group that worked with graffiti artists in order to try to more express themselves with using kind of their old school techniques, which is more updated technology. And so this sort of stuff, particularly in a context where there's a cause, is kind of my personal jam, and is something we really love at DEFCON 2.1. So my question is I believe, I'm trying to remember the name because my name's bad. Is Project Justice in the house?
Project Truth.
Project Truth. I'm sorry, Project Truth. We're gonna switch them on now, and you have the cam, so take it away.
Yeah, so we're an anonymous art collective. We spread truth through public projection art installations. We just use our platform to have artists of color send us content that we can then use at the protests to make our voices heard in a more in a larger scale. So got inspiration from the Illuminator NYC. That's an art collective there as well. That's anonymous, and they do similar work. So yeah.
Awesome. My question here. So if you want to break down, mainly because I've been following your Instagram feed, what sort of what's a particular way you use your technology in order to get a social a justice message out there?
Well, like I said, we really like to receive content from anywhere around the world, especially artists of color. We use our projectors to make it visible to the people in power to see the message.
And we're basically just looking for the most visible locations we can find, whether it's in support directly where a protest is going on, or where we feel a message is going to be visible by the police or whomever it is that we're trying to get a message across to or about. And so we've set ourselves up so that we can run off of batteries. We don't have to plug in everywhere. And so we have the ability to pop up somewhere and start projecting until we're either done or someone tries to chase us away.
Could you give us a bit more details about your disclosure about the some of the hardware, the projectors that you use? I don't know if you have any to show on Canva. If you don't, can you describe to me sort of like how high end they are? Is there like a budget concern for it? Like, I just want to know a bit more about it.
Yeah. So I don't mind disclosing any of that. So your average home theater projector is going to be about 3,000 lumens. So that's how bright something is, a lumen. So our projector is 7,500 lumens. So it's lower end professional grade power, but it's higher than consumer grade. So if you go to a concert or a festival and they have projectors, those are 20,000 lumens. So we're right in the middle on the scale. We run, a laptop for portability off that projector, and like my partner here was saying, we have a marine deep cycle battery, which lasts longer than car batteries and is rechargeable. And we run it through a power converter, and it powers our rig for about 45 minutes, depending on what we're doing, how much activity is going on in the projector.
And we have the ability to add additional batteries to that so we can run longer. So that's something that we're hoping to be able to do soon.
So there is budgetary issues because all that stuff is expensive, but we want to use our gear that we've personally built up for other things. Like I do stuff for electronic music shows for fun or anything like that, to use it in the movement, use my privilege to help people who need their voice heard.
Right on. My question, I have a couple more questions here before, if anyone, I think our chat's honestly really bamboozled here, because usually when they're quiet like this, that means they're really into who's ever speaking. Hi, person, that was my right. What is, was there any particular thing that inspired you in order to do these sort of projections, whether it's your background or you may have heard something similar that some other group somewhere in the world has done this? I was just curious about any of your inspirations for this.
Yeah, so I'm always looking online for inspiration from other projectionists. And when the protests started happening and all the police brutality and injustice in Louisville started happening, I'm searching the internet about stuff involving that, and I'm also searching about my personal interests, and it just started crossing over, and I came across a group called the Illuminator, and they're based in New York City, and they do large scale protest projection. And in New York, there's a lot of buildings like the UN buildings or government buildings from other countries, and they'll hit any subject as far as like climate change, social injustice, anything like that. So I just wanted to bring something like that to my hometown in Louisville.
Cool. Before I go to the next question, I just want to show off. Originally, we were supposed to be projecting stuff, and thank you, Ethan Lyler. They have everyone likes to challenge us with their Twitch days, so thank you for following us right now during our stream. But I just wanted to quickly show. I'm going to switch over to our camera. We originally were supposed to project this outside for the people, so we had this projection camera. The problem is literally the amount of light, because normally we're here from 7 to 10, but now we are, as I try to find my cursor here, are out from 5 to 5 to 8 due to COVID restrictions. So I'm going to go back to OBS. The Illumination Group, hold on, car. Illumination Group sounds familiar because the first time I've heard of this stuff was when I'll dox myself here, it was back when I was working with the Yes Men under different stuff in New York City, and I encountered like these sort of like this digital graffiti where, instead of spray painting on something, you're kind of projecting on the things. And then unfortunately, which is what happens with movements like these, is now when you see that type of stuff in New York, it's for advertisements for like different like mega companies and stuff like that. Because it's like where the subways, where if you look around, like all the obnoxious advertisements on subways are all the places, including outside of the trains and buses, where they used to do tags. So one of my running jokes is that graffiti is not a crime as long as it's corporate graffiti. Like if it's just expression for people, like they hate you, but if you pay them to put Coca-Cola ads everywhere, they absolutely love that, tattoo their children with it. It's great and it's disgusting. I also want to bring up Louisville real quick because I have relatives in Louisville. I actually went over there 2 years ago for my cousin to get married. And for all the hackers listening out there, Louisville is probably the most famous for hosting a hacker convention by Dave Kennedy, known as DerbyCon, for a couple of years. So just let this know, it's kind of how weird you meet people, and then like you be like, oh, we work at this building or this thing, and then it turns out there's like a history both there behind different things. I wanted to do a question, unless someone has anything with chat, about have you run into any legality issues doing this, and like how, like, I don't want to dock yourselves how you don't get caught, but sort of like how do you sort of skirt around the law with that, which admittedly can be a tricky question, because as someone recently told me for a job thing that I'm not going to disclose, it's, they ask you on jobs, are you going to be part of a group? Are you part of a group that wants to overthrow the United States government? And that person legit said, now with our current leadership, that's a tricky question, because basically, like if Trump has a bad McDonald's salad, all of a sudden McDonald's is now a terrorist group, so that becomes a tricky question. But have you run into like legality issues with these, or like how do you skirt around that?
Haven't really. We've had discussions with a lawyer who has volunteered their time to advise us on what we can and cannot do. Generally, we've been pretty unmolested. The first time that we projected, we kind of just did it on the cuff. We were on the top of a building, and we ended up police helicopters came right over to us, and they were on top of us. They literally came down right over us with their searchlights on us and everything as we were scrambling off this roof and trying to load out all the equipment and stuff. And that was a little intense because we were on a rickety ladder and they were blinding us as we were trying to load out with heavy equipment. But I mean, other than that, we've generally, we've been okay.
I feel like we've been pretty lucky, but as you know, the police are escalating. So I hopefully nothing gets smashed or broken, or I don't mind getting arrested, but I just hope that they don't take it to that level.
And you've probably seen that now we technically officially have a Gestapo now in this nation. So as I always say on half of every stream, that like, because I've had to describe to European hackers like what America is like. It's like someone who's grown up like as an American. And the way I've always described it is we're a third world country with first world money. And I feel like in the past couple of years we're running out of the money, hence all of the one of our chat members asked, is it possible to extend Project Truth to India? And I guess I'd extend that question is, would you be interested in working with artists in like other nations or states to sort of spread this around?
100%. Yeah, 100%. If they want to contact us, go on Instagram It's project_truth_Louisville. So
We
there-
ju-
some,
Go on.
yeah,
Sorry.
some people say project, some people say project. We started it, and I say it both ways. So it's technically project.
Should be project.
It's DEFCON 201. We always love it both ways, as we say. We just reshared
Yeah.
your Instagram direct link into the chat for people who are curious and who are watching later.
Also, another thing I wanted to touch on: if anyone's inspired to do this, a good place to start is projecting on publicly owned government buildings, because you can't get in trouble for that. No one can sue you for defamation. Like, if you project on someone's private company and they don't agree with the message, they can.
So you're
that's
liable. And,
that's the legal line. So. Yeah.
That's what's so weird about digital projection, because since you're dealing with photons instead of paint, it's like the ultimate, like, I'm touching you, I'm not touching you sort of thing. One last question before I try to open it up to see if any of the knuckleheads out there, and if anyone in chat wants to do it in the next 2 minutes before we go, because again, our next speaker is just, it's going to be a lot of a presentation, but I'm so happy that you and our previous speakers are on here. How's the activism response been locally and globally? Because I'm not part of Black Lives Matter, but I do know a lot of the people who do the stuff in New York and New Jersey. We were actually at our local Black Lives Matter protest a couple of weeks ago, and we're trying to get in to teach them better security measures, just because it's like it changes all the time, and we're hoping also to do that for Hackers on Planet Earth, so stay tuned for that. But how's the activist responses been? Have people reached out to you with their art? Have you talked with some of, like, if it's too sensitive, it's fine, but I just want to know, in terms of just general activism and artists, have people been reaching out to you? Do you have to search for these people? What's that response been?
At first, we reached out to some people that we enjoy their art, and they were happy to contribute. And from there, after the couple times we projected, it just started happening more organically. On our social media, it says, whoever wants to leave art, just DM us. The response has been great. It's been 45 days now, 46 days of straight protests in Louisville. People are getting tired, but they're still showing up. And I guess our general response that we get is, when we show up and we start projecting what they're saying or art, it just gives them an energy boost after they've been there all day. Because we can't do anything until about 9:45, 10 o'clock, when it's finally dark enough. So at that point, everyone's tired. They've been protesting since whatever time of the day, and it's always just a nice way for us to contribute and boost morale.
Actually given us you've actually been you just go straight in. You've been giving us the most amount of views so far, to be honest. Like, Zoe was ramping up, and you guys have reached this new plateau, so thank you. I just want to share a quick story before I open up to these knuckleheads here, and then I have one final question to ask you guys that will tie into this, and then we can move on to our next speaker. Every meeting, we think we have the most awesome speakers. Like, the next meeting, I don't know how this happens, because I'm the one that you speak to organize this stuff, but it's still, I just can't believe that you people exist. Like, it's just so freaking awesome. But just wanted to personally share an art project that I did, but the statute of limitations are far beyond this now, so I share this. It's kind of interesting to see government and corporate response to when you do art projects and activism like that, because I know from experience, the first time the MTA tried to truly raise the fare to over $3, and Athletic Sciences from YouTube said you guys rock. So I don't know if that meant DEFCON 201 or you guys, but I honestly think you guys are, that's why I brought you on. You guys are amazing, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I was at the protest for that, and they literally the only protest I had ever seen, the two protests I've seen bigger than the MTA hike fare protest 8-10 years ago, was the women's protest, and Alex Science did both, and the recent Black Lives Matter protest everywhere, which to me is the 90s Seattle protest part 2, but nationwide and even globally. And what was so fascinating to watch was which is why I like the sort of disruptive thing you guys are doing, where you're just projecting stuff and reminding people of Breonna Taylor and reminding people about their rights and things like that. Is I'm here, and there's 1 billion people, and there were student unions and celebrities and all sorts of people miles wide, and believe it or not, the NYPD were actually really nice to us and everything. There was no, but MTA did not absolutely give a crap. They just did not care. They were so used to people with signs and yelling. One of the MTA employees actually tried to attack the protesters, and the police arrested them, one of the executives. That shows you the level. So we came up with an idea that we pitched to the Yes Men, and the Yes Men were like just me with a couple of friends, and we went out and we actually got a PDF which got leaked of what their notices are in the subway are for, and we rearranged it so that it talked about the bad fare stuff in this mocking way, and then the website linked to a website that we made a mirror of their website, but it had like all the awful like parody news, like the Onion type stuff that the MTA would do. And so what was kind of fascinating to watch is there was like over 1,000 people at these MTA protests. MTA didn't care. When we put those signs up, there was arrest warrants out. They put in newspapers and like being interviewed. They were mad because the key is that, which is why I like what you guys do, they freak out when, one, you do it on their own turf, and two, they freak out when you do it on their own turf and they don't know how you do it. So what you're kind of telling them is, we know you guys better than you do, and that makes them afraid because they don't have that control. And we kept switching tunnels. Like they put all these police in Manhattan, they were in Brooklyn. Then we started to put some up on like on some of the subway systems that aren't in use anymore that their service guys use. And because we put the PDF online on the website, like the MTA really wants you to like put up your own signs. We want to hear from the community, and people put up their own parodies. They gave up, and that's in like 2 weeks they just canceled the whole thing. So that really shows how, again, two schmucks with a bunch of printouts just took down that entire system, and that's what I see with you guys there. So thank you so much for your service. Before I ask the last question, do you guys have any questions about Project Truth? Guys, do you have any questions about Project Truth and what they're doing with digital graffiti? Or, okay, I'm pretty sure you guys will probably up. Siricel has one, and then I'll do the one last question, and then we need to really give our last speaker a lot of time. So go right ahead.
So I've been doing random visual projects with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for a while. Are there any good ways to merge like AR projection mapping through JavaScript and like web technologies like that?
Like to use web for the projection stuff that you guys do.
And just keep in mind that I actually can't hear them because I'm not monitoring.
That's fine.
So I'll
Yeah,
do
this.
your answer when I get.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
there we go. That works.
Yeah, it's not something that we've looked into yet. Although we've started to have some discussions around that. I do some mixed reality development.
Okay.
Starting with the HoloLens platform. So it's definitely something that we've been discussing. We've been talking about ways to approach what we're doing with code and using projection mapping and different things.
Yeah.
So it's
in the pipeline.
Yeah, it's in the air. It's in the pipeline.
I mean, like I said, we're open to working with any artist. If you're interested in collaborating or talking to us about that, reach out to us on Instagram. And we'll go from there. So we have
I don't
no problem
use
with
Instagram,
that. That sounds awesome.
I'll reach you elsewise.
Yeah, if you get in contact with us and you need people to do like mixed media stuff, especially in terms of like coding and web design, we know those. Last things I want to bring up, because I just shared the link in our chat, is that I know you guys have a GoFundMe, because as you said, this whole thing is sort of expensive. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, and we'll go to our next speaker?
Yeah, it's mostly the GoFundMe is mostly to add more battery time, also to just kind of insure our equipment, because all of everything we bought is out of our own pocket, and
everything from the projector to the cart that we put everything on. If we were to have a very successful GoFundMe, though, we would absolutely love to upgrade to a projector that has a much higher lumen, number of lumens, something very, very bright, because it would allow us to have a greater reach. We could hit buildings from further away, and we could hit things larger and brighter that way. So, that's fingers crossed. If at some point we were to get enough people feeling like what we're doing is worth investing in a little bit, we would certainly try to up our game, do more.
And also at the we haven't, because everything's so fluid right now, we haven't come to like a hard line on a date, but I think we're going to probably take it down at some point, and then after that donate a percentage to, we're going to do a poll and see who wants, or whatever charity would be best. We're going to donate part of it to the charity. So
I will say, as a resource, because we're looking into it right now, there's a URL resource, particularly for Black African American trans people, where if you put it through their system, it will actually, like, you can click or just have them all of these multiple Black Lives Matter charities and LGBTI charities, and it'll distribute them through evenly. So I can send you the links to that later if you're interested.
Yeah, please do. That sounds amazing.
So if there's any last words you want guys do, I just want to say thank you for all of your activism work. And again, like, the cameras might not be filming currently, but everyone's still doing the good fight. And thank you for doing the good fight and contributing your technology for such a great cause.
Thanks for having us on. And I guess my last word is, if anyone wants to contribute, we love to collaborate, and we want to help get everyone out there. We want to help change things. So just contact us.
Awesome. Once again, thank you for your time, and I'm unfortunately going to have to go to the next speaker. Not unfortunately, like, they're bad or anything. It's just we just need to get the show up. We just need to get the show on the road. So we're going to switch out. So before we go on, I just want to do one thing, just in case he leaves. One of our members who's usually here, Puking Monkey's Eye, I just want to note that's his screen right now. So he's streaming us. And there he is. Hi there. Do you have any quick things to say before we go to our next speaker?
Not really.
So you're like our chat, where you're just like, okay, this is interesting. I'll stay quiet for once.
I'm drinking beer and eating pizza.
That's kind of how these things work. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Picky Monkey, because we had some time at the end. We'll bring it back on and bring some of these knuckleheads that are out here back on before we have to turn into a pumpkin early, thanks to New Jersey law. But again, there's a deadly disease out there.
Actually, there's not a curfew in New Jersey.
Well, there's not a curfew, but the businesses have decided, for the most part, to just
No, that's actually how they're enforcing it, because the curfew was unpopular. They just make the businesses close.
Yeah, I know. So they did that. That's the thing. Like, we're not complaining here about it. We're just, that's the current thing right now. It's, if we all stayed home for 14 days, but if you've seen Florida, so there's a lot going on. But I just want to go to our next speaker. I just want to say hi to you, Puking Monkey, and hopefully we'll have some time to bring back on there. And I don't know how we're going to survive next month. Oh God, I thought being in person would be bad, but this is oof. So anyhow, so to our next speaker here that I'm going to queue up, I'm going to put myself on the camera for a little bit right now. All I can say is IRC v3. It's the myth, the legend, it's the thing that everyone wants, but apparently everyone's like, when is it happening? And you talk to guys and there's like 50 million people like, we're IRC v3, and it's like, cool, who's programming for it? So, but we actually found some guys who are not only on the project, but they've actually done things with it, which in the modern hacker word's amazing, because in after the white paper and bug bounties, you're actually doing something, like even just trying, like, holy crap, congratulations already. So we're like, we have to bring these guys on. This is exciting. Like when I mentioned to our co-founder could be here right now, usually we're jumping up and down for joy. So without further ado, just give it the most time. What do you guys do with IRC v3, and what's that cool programming, that server you programmed in Go? Take it away.
Hi, am I audible? Is there too much background noise?
No, as soon as we shut off our microphone, we'll be good, and then we'll open up to questions when you ramp down in it. By the way, real quick, if I step out at one moment, I might have to do one or two things for like 10 minutes, and I'll be back, so if I just move out, don't be worried. So here we go. Take it away. Tell us your awesome thing, because this is really crazy chat. You guys will love this.
Hi, so I'm Shipram, and I'm going to talk about Oregono and sort of the trajectory IRC has been on for the past 32 years, and I should clarify that I'm not speaking as a representative of IRCv3 as a whole. I'm going to give sort of an opinionated partisan perspective focused around one project. So, okay, IRC, what is it? It's been around since 1988. It's very old. We'll get into some of the implications of how old it is. But the fundamentals are pretty simple. They're like every other chat platform. You have users and you have chat rooms. Users are identified by nicknames. We'll get into that. The chat rooms are called channels, and they start with a hash mark. And a fun piece of trivia is that this is actually the origin of the hashtag, is that the early adopters of Twitter were IRC people, and they thought, oh, if you search Twitter for a hashtag, that'll be like being in a particular IRC channel. Okay, so for about half the lifetime of IRC, IRCv3 has existed in some form or other, and the reason the reason IRC-v3 is going on so long is not because it's stagnant, but because like HTML5, it's become a living standard. Like IRC-v3 is the umbrella term for these sort of consensus open standards-based extensions to the IRC protocol. And so the good part of this is that most major IRC projects, servers, clients, and service frameworks are participants in IRC-v3. So I've spoken briefly in praise of IRC, and now I'm going to talk a little trash about IRC. So IRC has a lot of problems. And IRC gets a lot of undeserved praise too. So one of the myths about IRC is that the wire format is good. Like it came up on Hacker News like about a month ago, and people were like, "Oh, the wire format, it's so simple, it's so easy to parse." So the wire format was great in 1988, and like actually by 2020 standards, it's terrible. So you can see an example of an IRC line at the top of the screen there. And basically all I'm going to say about the syntax of the format is that it has space delimited parameters, but also some parameters need to be able to contain spaces, and this is not handled in the same way with escaping. It's handled in this like weird hacky way that creates a lot of problems. 1988 is obviously before Unicode, so the good news is that the wire format coincidentally allows an easy upgrade to UTF-8, but still we have a lot of problems with encodings because no one was able to make the right decisions about that up front. There's a 512 character total budget for an IRC message, including metadata. So the question is, how long can an IRC chat message really be? And it's possible to figure that out, but it's hard. But so sort of the strangest thing about IRC is if you look at that message, you'll see this long thing at the beginning. It has like the words Nick and purple and Comcast in it. That's called the Nick mask or the host mask. And it reflects some design decisions that made a lot of sense in 1988 and don't really make sense anymore. So the Nick part of that is a publicly visible identifier. That's like how you show up to people when you chat. And that thing that looks like a host name, that is a host name. That is the reverse DNS entry for the user's home IP address. And so the question is, why is IRC exposing this information to sort of every participant in the chat? That's a very strange decision. And the answer is that made more sense in 1988, which we'll get into. And the best part is that thing in the middle that says purple. Like, what is that? Is that like a second nickname? It's like an alternate version of a nickname. So that originally was the Unix username of the user. So like what? Okay, so all these decisions were made before the quote-unquote eternal September of 1993. This was back when sort of all internet access was through universities. In order to be on the net, you were like on there through your university affiliation, you were under the supervision, so to speak, of some kind of systems administrator. So in the original version of the protocol, that purple @hostname thing was actually a stable identifier that picked out who you were on the net. And that doesn't work anymore. So the idea was that IRC would be a federated network of equal untrusted peer servers. And this network would be completely stateless in that all the state would be online. The way you would claim a nickname or a channel would be by connecting to the network and trying to claim the nickname or trying to join the channel. And if nobody else had it, then you would get it. And so this vision sort of immediately starts to break down, like within 2 years maybe. So the first problem is that people realize that the server-to-server federation protocol is not actually resilient against malicious action by hostile server administrators. This is called the Eris controversy or the FNet split. And so the upshot was that the server operators realized they really needed to be on the same page with each other about software and about moderation. They had to trust each other. So we get this revised vision of IRC where it's a federated network of equal trusted peer servers. Like there's sort of one administration for the whole network. So it's a distributed system, but there's some retreat from that decentralization model. Still, this hasn't changed the character of things too much. But within another 5 years or so, things start to change even more. So, okay, so in distributed systems, you may be familiar with this idea called the CAP theorem, which says that there's these three desirable properties for a distributed system to have: consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. And you can pick two, you can't have all three. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about what those terms mean, but IRC is available and partition tolerant. So you can get like these weird behaviors under partition, but the system stays up even under network partition. It stays up in some degraded form. So the other sort of there's a similar idea in distributed systems called the Zuko's triangle. And so what Zuko's triangle says is that when you have a system for names or identifiers, like usernames on a website or domain names or Bitcoin addresses or something like that, there's three desirable properties: human readability, decentralization, and security. And you can only have 2 out of 3. So for example, usernames on a mainstream website, like, I don't know, Reddit or whatever, those are human readable. Like you can remember someone's username. It's like recognizable words. And it's secure because it's secured by the centralized infrastructure, but it's not decentralized. And something like a Bitcoin address or an Onion address, that's decentralized and it's secure, but it's not human readable. It's like a bunch of gobbledygook because it's the hash of a private key, of a public key or something. And IRC nicknames and channel names are human readable and decentralized, but they're not secure because someone can steal them under network partition. This was known as writing the split or net split writing, if you've ever heard those terms. So Zuko's triangle was not some kind of ironclad impossibility theorem like the CAP theorem. People have designed systems that achieve all three things. For example, Namecoin manages to get all those three things by basically putting the human readable names on a blockchain. But the point is more that it's very hard to get all three properties. You have to design for it very deliberately, and most people haven't. So in 1995, people realized that the sort of human readable and decentralized but insecure nature of IRC identifiers like nicknames and channel names was becoming a problem. And so Dalnet innovated the services framework, which is a privileged node that has a database. It has persistent state, and it ensures a reservation of nicknames and channel names, so they can't be stolen during network partition. They're protected by like a password system or something. So what's interesting is this is actually a considerable retreat, and I think an underappreciated retreat from the vision of a fully decentralized system, because now you have this one privileged node that really has sort of superpowers on the network. In theory, if you were to compromise that node, you could sort of violate all the guarantees of the network. What's also interesting is that the system as a whole is still available under partition, but if you're partitioned away from the services node, you're no longer getting the secure guarantees that it's supposed to provide. So IRC is still an available and partition tolerant system, but IRC as it is currently used in practice, for example on Freenode, I would say is not truly decentralized. So IRC-v3. So IRC-v3 has a lot of like really great achievements, and to give you there's the two sort of central things are capability negotiation, which is this protocol extension that provides backwards compatible negotiation of protocol upgrades, and also the tag system, which allows metadata to be attached to messages. So you can see in this example that there's the message ID, which is a UUID-v4, in this case, attached to the message for deduplication. There's a server timestamp that shows you when the message was originally processed. There's an account tag that's actually semi-secure data authenticating the origin of the message. And then after that, you have the legacy message in all its glory with the nickname and the username and the host name. So the problems that IRC-v3 hasn't really solved or isn't maybe isn't terribly interested in solving are the continued statelessness of the core. There's still, by default, a one-to-one mapping between being present on the network and having a live TCP connection to the network. So if you want to multiplex a single presence on the IRC network across two devices, that's not something that's provided natively by most IRC servers. You need a third-party middleware called a balancer to do that. And similarly, by default, there's no message history because there's no place like set aside in the network architecture to store it. And also, sort of, you have these sort of new concepts that are being added to the system, like account names. But the old ones haven't really gone away either. Like, you still have that funny Unix username thing that's actually meaningless. You still have the host name being transmitted to everyone. I think most people in 2020 do not expect their home IP address to be exposed to other participants in a web forum or a chat system. So Oregano has existed in some form or another since 2012. And sort of the first production ready release, I think, was in 2019. The first version with like full history support was in March 2020. We have a new version coming out hopefully next week. The maintainers are my collaborator Daniel Oakes and me. So okay, so it's 2020. Why use IRC? IRC has lots of competitors. It has proprietary competitors. It has free and open source clones of the proprietary competitors, like Mattermost and Rocket Chat are basically like, we're going to duplicate Slack down to the pixel. So why use IRC? It's traditional, which is nice. Less is more in the sense that, do you really want, emoji reactions on every message? Maybe you don't. IRC is cozy, which I will get into more later. And I think one of the strongest features of IRC is that IRC-v3 has created a robust multi-stakeholder ecosystem of servers and clients. Like, it's not just one company sort of controlling the entire server client ecosystem. So this does impact the pace of development. Like, it does slow down development, but I think also it leads to a healthier, more robust process around extensions. Why use Oregano in particular? And so this is I'm a little uncomfortable saying this out loud, but so we see that Slack very successfully practiced embrace, extend, extinguish on IRC. Like they took an original product that was basically IRC. They added more and more enhancements. Originally, they had an IRC gateway. Where it would interoperate with conventional IRC, and then once they got far enough along in their trajectory, they shut down those gateways. There's no longer an official Slack to IRC gateway. So what they did is gross, but I think nonetheless, they tapped into something real. The experience of having a Slack or a Discord is a lot like the experience of having a private IRC server. And I think because that is something that seems to appeal to people, that sort of proves the viability of this private IRC concept. And I think Oregano is maybe more willing than other IRC-v3 projects to sort of take those lessons and deviate from the traditional IRC experience in ways that are more user-friendly. So the project design goals are being extremely easy to set up and self-host. I think it's much easier to get Oregano up and running than a conventional IRC plus a services framework like an Opera theme. We're a bleeding edge IRC-v3 reference implementation. but the really notable thing, I think, is we combine the IRC server, the services framework, and the bouncer into a single package. And so together with Kiwi IRC, which is sort of the bleeding edge web client for IRC v3, these products together, I think, are not quite at parity with Discord, but like well on the way to being a Discord replacement. So in a single portable statically linked binary, we're able to provide user accounts, nickname reservation, channel reservation, but also features that you used to need a bouncer for, like allowing multiple clients to share a nickname, being able to store history on the server and then play it back to clients who are disconnected. We've been able to separate presence on the network from having an active connection to the server. So you can sort of freely like disconnect or roam without disrupting the experience of people who are chatting with you. And this is all without the need for infrastructure managed by end users. Like I know, like a number of my friends have a VPS or something that is solely used for IRC. And that's just a huge barrier to entry for new users. So it's our objective to get rid of that. And IP cloaking is basically the idea of, instead of showing the actual IP address or reverse DNS entry for the IP address to end users, just take a MAC, a message authentication code, or in other words, a one-way hash of the IP address, and show that instead. So that still allows channel operators to moderate people by IP address, or end users to ignore people by IP address, but it doesn't reveal the actual location or anything that can be used to derive the actual address. So in exchange for all this, we've accepted a very considerable, very serious limitation, which is that Oregano is a single instance, and it's not currently horizontally scalable. This is not as catastrophic as it might be. I would say, because it's implemented in Go, so it will scale up and down very elegantly to very large or very small machines. Like it'll run on your home router. It'll run on a 64-core Xeon. It also, another thing that comes up a lot in connection with the single instance idea is that it's a single point of failure, but that's actually eliminable with new technologies like Kubernetes, because you can use Kubernetes primitives to deploy Oregano in such a way that an external cluster management software will recover from failure. And there's a proof of concept implementation done by the people at Hashbang, if you've heard of them. That's linked in our manual, and you can take a look at it. So in terms of the CAP theorem, we've gone from being an AP system to a CP to a CP system. And in terms of Zuko's triangle, we've abandoned decentralization completely, but the trade-off is that user identifiers and channel identifiers are fully secure. So I think maybe more interesting than the technical details are what you can do. So yeah. So maybe more interesting than So the question is like, what kind of communities can you create around this software? And I think here's like where you get into some like really promising territory. So I don't know if you've noticed, but the public internet is an extremely unpleasant place to be in 2020. And so you have a bunch of people who are sort of commenting on this fact and proposing solutions. Darius Kazemi has this like really interesting page called runyourown.social, where he talks about his experiences of running a Mastodon for a private community of about 100 people. And basically the idea is that if you have full community control over data, code, membership, and moderation, you can really do things with online communities that you can't do under the supervision of a commercial social network, or there's this other sort of viral article going around that talks about the quote unquote Internet of Beefs, basically Twitter, where people are yelling at each other continuously, or where what you thought was a private conversation can suddenly go viral, versus the cozy web, which is it's just a twist on the old deep web idea that's like a less visible, more private space on the internet. And this is something that I think to take very seriously in terms of software design at this point. So the two Oregano features that are salient to this are, we have the option of time-limited retention of history messages. So you can configure Oregano so it only keeps history around for a week, say. This is also helpful if you're worried about something like GDPR compliance. You can also set Oregano to retain messages arbitrarily far back, but only play back messages to the user that they hypothetically could have seen. So, for example, if you register an account today, then you won't be able to see messages that were sent in June ever. So the vision we're sort of getting at, the vision that's sort of implicit in this is a more Jeffersonian conception of the internet. You have small platforms that are individually centralized, but they're autonomous, they're under community control. And I think the sort of challenge or promise of this is to be able to have internet spaces that are neither completely public nor completely private. Like if you, there is I think many people have this like deep attraction to the vision of IRC, where you can interact with people you never would have met in real life. And so anonymous access, like the ability to just hop on IRC without having a user account or anything, is part of that. But also, I think nobody wants IRC to turn into Twitter. So the question is, what are the right moderation tools to provide to operators to make that happen? And I think the system that we're working towards, with a mix of user accounts and cloaking of IPs, is, you know, it's an approach. We'll see how it goes. What are we missing? We do not have horizontal scalability, but we do need it. That's an engineering challenge to implement, but I think we're going to get there eventually. We need text search for parity with major chat competitors. That is harder because there's been really no discussion yet about how to specify that or how to do it. I think on the whole, client support is lagging behind server support. So I think it would be good to get closer participation from clients. For parity with Discord, we'd need integration with Jitsi, and it would also be nice to converge on a solution for a multi-party end-to-end encryption. So for one-on-one conversations, you can use OTRv3, which is great. I think there are a number of existing implementations that just tunnel that over regular IRC messages. But for multi-party, there's no consensus on how to do that yet. If you've been following the messaging layer security working group, I'd encourage you to check them out. They're doing something interesting here. You can find us on GitHub or in the Oregano channel on Freenode. Ironically, we are not self-hosted for our support channel. We're on Freenode. Yeah, that's everything. Any questions?
Yes, thank you for that. Unfortunately, we just found out from our venue that we're going to be actually wrapping that up real soon, so I'm going to make the questions quick. One of our people in chat just asked, what was the single biggest missing feature in Oregano and or IRC? But I guess let's focus on the server that you're building. Like, what's the single biggest feature that you would want to implement ASAP?
I think it's probably like 50-50 between horizontal scalability and text search.
Okay.
But I think there's really no, I think, realistic pathway to getting same client support for text search anytime soon. So let's say it was on scalability.
Awesome. I guess real quick, does anyone have any questions about IRC v3 before we wrap up the stream?
Any questions for IRC v3?
I kind of wish that G.I. Jack was here because he's like the most interested in IRC Type 3.
Yeah.
But I just shared your website in here. Again, the only reason we're running this quick is because our venue has to unexpectedly close down a little bit earlier. But thank you so much for this talk. In fact, again, like I'd love to in a couple of months like try to do like a quick update and see where you guys are at on the project and and hopefully GI Jack can pick you guys' brain because our co-founder's been talking about IRC v3 for a while. As they say, I also put their website in oregano.io. You think you can find the same thing at Freenode, and I'm gonna later on we're gonna share your GitHub repo with our current repo. So I just wanted to thank you for your time. I wish we could have. Is there any quick questions out there in chat? Just like 1 minute left. Anyone in chat? We can see you type. Counting down. I think everyone's just too mystified by the talk right now. So yeah, no. Thank you so much, I guess, for the talk here. Someone said, "See you back on the Internet of Beefs." Yes, thank you for that presentation. And just to note for you and all the other speakers, this stuff is archived particularly on YouTube, and we're going to make individual uploads in the future, so you will be able to get a copy of this for yourself, whether it's hosted on the internet or downloaded. So just want to put that out there. So I'm going to switch the camera back to me. Again, thank you so much for your talk. We'll do follow-up emails a little bit later. And
everyone stay safe out there.
Yes, we're trying to, especially with the masks and with the police. And yeah, that is basically our meeting. I know we said we would go directly to 8. We're going to quickly see who we can. We're going to see quickly who we can invade here on for you out there on Twitch. Just give us 1 second for that. Let's see, what are the live channels right now? Because right now we're slowly turning to a pumpkin, and we have to put a bunch of cables back as everything runs really slow, because we're directly wired in. That's why we actually have the speeds that we do. Let's see, which channel would be a good one to invade? How about, who needs the viewers? Let's go to, let's see here, real quick. I know what we can do. Devin Nash is actually talking about the Twitter hacks going on. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to bring it to my camera. By the way, thank you, Puking Monkey, for being on in here. I'm sorry we couldn't be long as it is, but you know, curfews and COVID and all of that. Curfews and COVID, that sounds like a romance novel. Yes. So we're going to turn the camera back on real quick. Where is the camera that I put? Thank you, RRMSR, for following us there on Twitter. And thank you also, DCAP3, for doing us. If you have lemons on DLive, send us lemons. We enjoy them. We actually did a whole special on DLive before. I'd like to do a follow-up for that on Crypto Barons. Hopefully you'll see us next week on Hackall and Commander, as well as where the heck did the video feed go? Where did it go? It's one of these here. I know I have it. Let's see. Let me quickly see if I can add a camera in here. It should just be video capture device. I don't know why it didn't show up. And come on. Where is this? I guess not. There we go. That's where it is. All right. So, Comedy Gold again, yes. So, thank you again for attending this stream. Hopefully next week you'll see Hackall and Commander, as well as our other shows like Archvile Linux Perspective. I have a show, Master of Unlocking, showing up this Sunday at 8 p.m. That's Sarah still in the background. I want to thank all of these amazing people outside for showing up, attending to this meeting here. This is going to be the start of the beginning. I know it seems small, but that's what she said. But no, it's COVID out there. We're all not trying to get infected because it's already bad enough. We're going to wrap this stream up now, and we're going to go raid this channel real quick. I'm going to type in raid Devin Nash, and now Twitch should direct you guys on Twitch over to Devin Nash to hear about the Twitter hacks. Thank you all for joining the live stream here. We meet at third Friday every month. You can meet us at DEFCON 2. There we go. DEFCON 2. There's the right hand, defcon201.org. This is Side Pocket here. Thank you for attending the DC201 meeting, and we will see you during DEFCON 201 Safe Mode and the overall Hacker Summer Camp like Hope and stuff. We have a lot of stuff planned for you. Stick to announcements.
Dirty Jersey represent.
Yes, Dirty Jersey represent. Hack the planet. Stick around for some of those announcements because DEFCON Groups is doing something really huge. Peace, guys, and be safe, and enjoy the rest of the day. Hack the planet! Enjoy the rest of the day out there, guys. See ya.
See ya. There you go. And we got off there.